Kerstfeest by Willem Bilderdijk, read in Dutch. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. God op aard in het vlees verschenen? O mijn ziel, gelooft gij dit? God in het kinderkrabjen venen, met de menselijkheid verenen als een zondig medelid? Hij de ellenden op zich laden? Hij de jammerzee doorwaden van ons zondenvol geslacht? Alle lijden, alle plagen op een aardrijk komen dragen, met verdienden vloek bevracht? Neen, dit kan geen hart geloven, stort hij het zelf niet in het gemoed. Openen zich de hemelhoven, dallen de engelenskaar van boven met dien blijden zegengroet. Breek, voor schrik en donderslagen, Gods bevredigd welbehagen door de wolken neer op de aard. Laat door 1000 engelenmonden deze blijmaar zich verkonden. God, uit maagden schoot gebaard. U, eenvoudig als uw kappen grazende door Bethlehemsdal. U, in onschuld ingeslapen. U, oprechte herdersknappen, wekt dat hemels juichgeschaal. Gij gaat het wiktjen vinden in de doeken die het omvinden, stort u neer op het aangezicht. Gij streeft om het aan te bidden, en zijn godheid in uw midden straalt u door met hemels licht. Ja, vanwaar de zon aan het rijzen d'eersten straal op Bethlehem spreidt, naderen morgenlandse wijzen, om den God der eer te prijzen in des wiktjens nederigheid. Ja, om hem te voet te vallen huppelen bij 1000 talen, semmels maakten om die koets. En wij zondaars, wij vertragen hem de schatting op te dragen van ons kuldig handvol bloeds? Geef, o gij die het kunt verlenen, geef ons het overtuigd geloof. Ja, gij zijt in het vlees verschenen, om het verbroken te herenen, ons te ontrukken aan den roof. Om een zuiver bloed te blengen, dat den afval weer moest brengen, Gods getergde wraak voldoen. Zonde, dood en afgrond vellen, onschuld, heiligheid herstellen, bracht ge uw heiligheid ten zoon. Stort uw geest, o albehoeder, wonderkind en vredevorst, werelschepper, wereldvoeder, in die krebbes mensenbroeder, in de toegesloten borst. Geef bij ons een nederbuiging, geeft het geloof, geef de overtuiging, dat gij ons in het vlees verscheent, en door u met God verbonden, en ontlaast van dood en zonden, heeft het mensdom uitgeweend. End of Kerstfeest by Willem Bilderdijk, read by Ezwa in Belgium in December 2008.
A Christmas Tree by Charles Dickens, read in English. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. A Christmas Tree by Charles Dickens. I have been looking on this evening at a merry company of children assembled round that pretty German toy, a Christmas tree. The tree was planted in the middle of a great round table, and towered high above their heads. It was brilliantly lighted by a multitude of little tapers, and everywhere sparkled and glittered with bright objects. There were rosy-cheeked dolls hiding behind the green leaves, and there were real watches, with movable hands at least, and an endless capacity of being wound up, dangling from innumerable twigs. There were French polished tables, chairs, bedsteads, wardrobes, 8-day clocks, and various other articles of domestic furniture, wonderfully made in tin at Wolverhampton, perched among the boughs as if in preparation for some fairy housekeeping. There were jolly, broad-faced little men, much more agreeable in appearance than many real men, and no wonder, for their heads took off and showed them to be full of sugar-plums. There were fiddles and drums, there were tambourines, books, work-boxes, paint-boxes, sweetmeat boxes, peep-show boxes, and all kinds of boxes. There were trinkets for the elder girls, far brighter than any grown-up gold and jewels. There were baskets and pincushions in all devices. There were guns, swords, and banners. There were witches standing in enchanted rings of pasteboard to tell fortunes. There were teetotums, humming-tops, needle-cases, pen-wipers, smelling bottles, conversation cards, bouquet-holders, real fruit made artificially dazzling with gold leaf, imitation apples, pears, and walnuts, crammed with surprises. In short, as a pretty child before me delightedly whispered to another pretty child, her bosom friend, there was everything and more. This motley collection of odd objects, clustering on the tree like magic fruit, and flashing back the bright looks directed towards it from every side, some of the diamond eyes admiring it were hardly on a level with the table, and a few were languishing in timid wonder on the bosoms of pretty mothers, aunts, and nurses, made a lively realization of the fancies of childhood, and set me thinking how all the trees that grow, and all the things that come into existence on the earth, have their wild adornments at that well-remembered time. Being now at home again and alone, the only person in the house awake, my thoughts are drawn back, by a fascination which I do not care to resist, to my own childhood. I begin to consider, what do we all remember best upon the branches of the Christmas tree of our own young Christmas days, by which we climbed to real life? Straight in the middle of the room, cramped in the freedom of its growth by no encircling walls or soon-reached ceiling, a shadowy tree arises, and looking up into the dreamy brightness of its top, for I observe in this tree the singular property that it appears to grow downward towards the earth, I look into my youngest Christmas recollections. All toys at first, I find. Up yonder, among the green holly and red berries, is the tumbler with his hands in his pockets, who wouldn't lie down, but whenever he was put upon the floor, persisted in rolling his fat body about, until he rolled himself still, and brought those lobster eyes of his to bear upon me, when I affected to laugh very much, but in my heart of hearts was extremely doubtful of him. Close beside him is that infernal snuff-box, out of which there sprang a demoniacal counsellor in a black gown, with an obnoxious head of hair, and a red cloth mouth, wide open, who was not to be endured on any terms, but could not be put away either, for he used suddenly, in a highly magnified state, to fly out of the mammoth snuff-boxes in dreams, when least expected. Nor is the frog with cobbler's wax on his tail far off, for there was no knowing where he wouldn't jump, and when he flew over the candle, and came upon one's hand with that spotted back, red on a green ground, he was horrible. The cardboard lady in a blue silk skirt, who was stood up against the candlestick to dance, and whom I see on the same branch, was milder and was beautiful. But I can't say as much for the larger cardboard man, who used to be hung against the wall and pulled by a string. There was a sinister expression in that nose of his, and when he got his legs round his neck, which he very often did, he was ghastly, and not a creature to be alone with. When did that dreadful mask first look at me? Who put it on, and why was I so frightened that the sight of it is an era in my life? It is not a hideous visage in itself. It is even meant to be droll. Why then were its stolid features so intolerable? Surely not because it hid the wearer's face. An apron would have done as much. And though I should have preferred even the apron away, it would not have been absolutely insupportable, like the mask. Was it the immovability of the mask? The doll's face was immovable, but I was not afraid of her. Perhaps that fixed and set change coming over a real face infused into my quickened heart some remote suggestion and dread of the universal change that is to come on every face, and make it still. Nothing reconciled me to it. No drummers from whom proceeded a melancholy chirping on the turning of a handle. No regiment of soldiers with a mute band taken out of a box, and fitted one by one upon a stiff and lazy little set of lazy tongs. No old woman made of wires and a brown paper composition, cutting up a pie for 2 small children, could give me a permanent comfort for a long time. Nor was it any satisfaction to be shown the mask and see that it was made of paper, or to have it locked up and be assured that no one wore it. The mere recollection of that fixed face, the mere knowledge of its existence anywhere, was sufficient to awake me in the night, all perspiration and horror, with, "Oh, I know it's coming! Oh, the mask!" I never wondered what the dear old donkey with the panniers (there he is) was made of then. His hide was real to the touch, I recollect. And the great black horse with the round red spots all over him, the horse that I could even get upon. I never wondered what had brought him to that strange condition, or thought that such a horse was not commonly seen at Newmarket. The 4 horses of no colour next to him, that went into the waggon of cheeses, and could be taken out and stabled under the piano, appear to have bits of fur tippet for their tails, and other bits for their manes, and to stand on pegs instead of legs. But it was not so when they were brought home for a Christmas present. They were all right then. Neither was their harness unceremoniously nailed into their chests, as appears to be the case now. The tinkling works of the music cart I did find out to be made of quill toothpicks and wire, and I always thought that little tumbler in his shirt sleeves, perpetually swarming up one side of a wooden frame and coming down head foremost on the other, rather a weak-minded person, though good-natured. But the Jacob's ladder next him, made of little squares of red wood that went flapping and clattering over one another, each developing a different picture, and the whole enlivened by small bells, was a mighty marvel and a great delight. Ah, the doll's house, of which I was not proprietor, but where I visited. I don't admire the Houses of Parliament half so much as that stone-fronted mansion, with real glass windows, and doorsteps, and a real balcony, greener than I ever see now, except at watering places, and even they afford but a poor imitation. And though it did open all at once, the entire house front, which was a blow, I admit, as cancelling the fiction of a staircase, it was but to shut it up again, and I could believe. Even open, there were 3 distinct rooms in it, a sitting-room and bedroom, elegantly furnished, and, best of all, a kitchen with uncommonly soft fire-irons, a plentiful assortment of diminutive utensils, the warming-pan, and a tin man-cook in profile, who was always going to fry 2 fish. What Barmecide justice have I done to the noble feasts, wherein the set of wooden platters figured, each with its own peculiar delicacy, as a ham or turkey glued tight on to it, and garnished with something green, which I recollect as moss? Could all the temperance societies of these later days united give me such a tea-drinking as I have had through the means of yonder little set of blue crockery, which really would hold liquid? It ran out of the small wooden cask, I recollect, and tasted of matches, and which made tea nectar. And if the 2 legs of the ineffectual little sugar-tongs did tumble over one another and want purpose, like Punch's hands, what does it matter? And if I did once shriek out, as a poisoned child, and strike the fashionable company with consternation by reason of having drunk a little teaspoon inadvertently dissolved in too hot tea, I was never the worse for it, except by a powder. Upon the next branches of the tree, lower down, hard by the green roller and miniature gardening tools, how thick the books begin to hang! Thin books in themselves at first, but many of them, and with deliciously smooth covers of bright red or green. What fat black letters to begin with! A was an archer and shot at a frog. Of course he was. He was an apple pie also, and there he is. He was a good many things in his time, was A, and so were most of his friends, except X, who had so little versatility that I never knew him to get beyond Xerxes or Xantippe, like Y, who was always confined to a yacht or a yew tree, and Z condemned for ever to be a zebra or a zany. But now the very tree itself changes, and becomes a beanstalk, the marvellous beanstalk up which Jack climbed to the giant's house. And now those dreadfully interesting double-headed giants, with their clubs over their shoulders, begin to stride along the boughs in a perfect throng, dragging knights and ladies home for dinner by the hair of their heads. And Jack, how noble, with his sword of sharpness and his shoes of swiftness! Again those old meditations come upon me as I gaze up at him, and I debate within myself whether there was more than one Jack, which I am loath to believe possible, or only one genuine, original, admirable Jack, who achieved all the recorded exploits. Good for Christmas time is the ruddy colour of the cloak in which, the tree making a forest of itself for her to trip through with her basket, Little Red Riding Hood comes to me one Christmas Eve to give me information of the cruelty and treachery of that dissembling wolf who ate her grandmother without making any impression on his appetite, and then ate her after making that ferocious joke about his teeth. She was my first love. I felt that if I could have married Little Red Riding Hood, I should have known perfect bliss. But it was not to be, and there was nothing for it but to look out the wolf in the Noah's Ark there, and put him late in the procession on the table, as a monster who was to be degraded. Oh, the wonderful Noah's Ark! It was not found seaworthy when put in a washing tub, and the animals were crammed in at the roof, and needed to have their legs well shaken down before they could be got in, even there. And then 10 to 1 but they began to tumble out at the door, which was but imperfectly fastened with a wire latch. But what was that against it? Consider the noble fly, a size or two smaller than the elephant. The ladybird, the butterfly, all triumphs of art. Consider the goose, whose feet were so small, and whose balance was so indifferent that he usually tumbled forward and knocked down all the animal creation. Consider Noah and his family, like idiotic tobacco stoppers, and how the leopard stuck to warm little fingers, and how the tails of the larger animals used gradually to resolve themselves into frayed bits of string. Hush! Again a forest, and somebody up in a tree. Not Robin Hood, not Valentine, not the Yellow Dwarf. I have passed him and all Mother Bunch's wonders without mention. But an Eastern king, with a glittering scimitar and turban. By Allah, 2 Eastern kings, for I see another looking over his shoulder. Down upon the grass at the tree's foot lies the full length of a coal-black giant, stretched asleep, with his head in a lady's lap, and near them is a glass box, fastened with 4 locks of shining steel, in which he keeps the lady prisoner when he is awake. I see the 4 keys at his girdle now. The lady makes signs to the 2 kings in the tree, who softly descend. It is the setting in of the bright Arabian Nights. Oh, now all common things become uncommon and enchanted to me. All lamps are wonderful, all rings are talismans. Common flower pots are full of treasure, with a little earth scattered on the top. Trees are for Ali Baba to hide in. Beefsteaks are to throw down into the Valley of Diamonds, that the precious stones may stick to them and be carried by the eagles to their nests, whence the traders with loud cries will scare them. Tarts are made according to the recipe of the vizier's son of Bassorah, who turned pastry cook after he was set down in his drawers at the gate of Damascus. Cobblers are all Mustafas, and in the habit of sewing up people cut into 4 pieces, to whom they are taken blindfold. Any iron ring let into stone is the entrance to a cave which only waits for the magician and the little fire and the necromancy that will make the earth shake. All the dates imported come from the same tree as that unlucky date with whose shell the merchant knocked out the eye of the genie's invisible son. All olives are of the stock of that fresh fruit concerning which the commander of the faithful overheard the boy conduct the fictitious trial of the fraudulent olive merchant. All apples are akin to the apple purchased, with 2 others, from the Sultan's gardener for 3 sequins, and which the tall black slave stole from the child. All dogs are associated with the dog, really a transformed man, who jumped upon the baker's counter and put his paw on the piece of bad money. All rice recalls the rice which the awful lady, who was a ghoul, could only peck by grains because of her nightly feasts in the burial place. My very rocking horse, there he is, with his nostrils turned completely inside out, indicative of blood, should have a peg in his neck, by virtue thereof to fly away with me, as the wooden horse did with the Prince of Persia, in the sight of all his father's court. Yes, on every object that I recognise among those upper branches of my Christmas tree, I see this fairy light. When I wake in bed at daybreak, on the cold, dark winter mornings, the white snow dimly beheld outside through the frost on the window-pane, I hear Dinazade. Sister, sister, if you are yet awake, I pray you finish the history of the young king of the Black Islands. Scheherazade replies, If my lord the Sultan will suffer me to live another day, sister, I will not only finish that, but tell you a more wonderful story yet. Then the gracious Sultan goes out, giving no orders for the execution, and we all three breathe again. At this height of my tree I begin to see, cowering among the leaves, it may be born of turkey, or of pudding, or mince pie, or of these many fancies, jumbled with Robinson Crusoe on his desert island, Philip Quarle among the monkeys, Sandford and Merton with Mr. Barlow, Mother Bunch, and the mask, or it may be the result of indigestion, assisted by imagination and over-doctoring, a prodigious nightmare. It is so exceedingly indistinct that I don't know why it's frightful, but I know it is. I can only make out that it is an immense array of shapeless things, which appear to be planted on a vast exaggeration of the lazy tongs that used to bear the toy soldiers, and to be slowly coming close to my eyes and receding to an immeasurable distance. When it comes closest, it is worse. In connection with it, I descry remembrances of winter nights incredibly long, of being sent early to bed as a punishment for some small offence, and waking in 2 hours with a sensation of having been asleep 2 nights, of the laden hopelessness of morning ever dawning, and the oppression of a weight of remorse. And now I see a wonderful row of little lights rise smoothly out of the ground before a vast green curtain. Now a bell rings, a magic bell, which still sounds in my ears unlike all other bells, and music plays amidst a buzz of voices and a fragrant smell of orange peel and oil. Anon the magic bell commands the music to cease, and the great green curtain rolls itself up majestically, and the play begins. The devoted dog of Montargis avenges the death of his master, foully murdered in the forest of Bondy, and a humorous peasant with a red nose and a very little hat, whom I take from this hour forth to my bosom as a friend. I think he was a waiter or an ostler at a village inn, but many years have passed since he and I have met, remarks that the sassagacity of that dog is indeed surprising. And evermore this jocular conceit will live in my remembrance, fresh and unfading, overtopping all possible jokes, unto the end of time. Or now I learn with bitter tears how poor Jane Shore, dressed all in white, and with her brown hair hanging down, went starving through the streets. Or how George Barnwell killed the worthiest uncle that ever man had, and was afterwards so sorry for it that he ought to have been let off. Comes swift to comfort me the pantomime, stupendous phenomenon, when clowns are shot from loaded mortars into the great chandelier, bright constellation that it is, when harlequins, covered all over with scales of pure gold, twist and sparkle like amazing fish, when Pantaloon, whom I deem it no irreverence to compare in my own mind to my grandfather, puts red-hot pokers in his pocket, and cries, "Here's somebody coming!" or taxes the clown with petty larceny by saying, "Now I saw'd you do it!" when everything is capable with the greatest ease of being changed into anything, and nothing is but thinking makes it so. Now, too, I perceive my first experience of the dreary sensation, often to return in after life, of being unable next day to get back to the dull, settled world, of wanting to live for ever in the bright atmosphere I have quitted, of doting on the little fairy with the wand like a celestial barber's pole, and pining for a fairy immortality along with her. Ah, she comes back in many shapes, as my eye wanders down the branches of my Christmas tree, and goes as often, and has never yet stayed by me. Out of this delight springs the toy theatre. There it is, with its familiar proscenium, and ladies in feathers in the boxes, and all its attendant occupation with paste and glue and gum and water-colours, in the getting up of the miller and his men, and Elizabeth or the exile of Siberia. In spite of a few besetting accidents and failures, particularly an unreasonable disposition in the respectable Kelmar and some others to become faint in the legs and double up at exciting points of the drama, a teeming world of fancies so suggestive and all-embracing that, far below it on my Christmas tree, I see dark, dirty, real theatres in the daytime, adorned with these associations as with the freshest garlands of the rarest flowers, and charming me yet. But hark! The waits are playing, and they break my childish sleep. What images do I associate with the Christmas music as I see them set forth on the Christmas tree? Known before all the others, keeping far apart from all the others, they gather round my little bed. An angel speaking to a group of shepherds in a field. Some travellers with eyes uplifted following a star. A baby in a manger. A child in a spacious temple talking with grave men. A solemn figure with a mild and beautiful face raising a dead girl by the hand. Again, near a city gate, calling back the son of a widow on his bier to life. A crowd of people looking through the opened roof of a chamber where he sits, and letting down a sick person on a bed with ropes. The same, in a tempest, walking on the water to a ship. Again on a seashore, teaching a great multitude. Again with a child upon his knee, and other children round. Again restoring sight to the blind, speech to the dumb, hearing to the deaf, health to the sick, strength to the lame, knowledge to the ignorant. Again dying upon a cross, watched by armed soldiers, a thick darkness coming on, the earth beginning to shake, and only one voice heard, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." Still on the lower and maturer branches of the tree, Christmas associations cluster thick. School books shut up, Ovid and Virgil silenced, the rule of 3, with its cool, impertinent inquiries, long disposed of. Terence and Plautus acted no more in an arena of huddled desks and forms, all chipped and notched and inked. Cricket bats, stumps and balls left higher up, with the smell of trodden grass and the softened noise of shouts in the evening air. The tree is still fresh, still gay. If I no more come home at Christmas time, there will be boys and girls, thank heaven, while the world lasts, and they do. Yonder they dance and play upon the branches of my tree, God bless them, merrily. And my heart dances and plays too. And I do come home at Christmas. We all do, or we all should. We all come home, or ought to come home, for a short holiday, the longer the better, from the great boarding school, where we are for ever working at our arithmetical slates, to take and give a rest. As to going a-visiting, where can we not go if we will? Where have we not been when we would, starting our fancy from our Christmas tree? Away into the winter prospect. There are many such upon the tree. On by low-lying misty grounds, through fens and fogs, up long hills, winding dark as caverns between thick plantations, almost shutting out the sparkling stars. So out on broad heights, until we stop at last, with sudden silence, at an avenue. The gate bell has a deep, half-awful sound in the frosty air. The gate swings open on its hinges, and as we drive up to a great house, the glancing lights grow larger in the windows, and the opposing rows of trees seem to fall solemnly back on either side to give us place. At intervals all day, a frightened hare has shot across this whitened turf, or the distant clatter of a herd of deer trampling the hard frost has for the minute crushed the silence too. Their watchful eyes beneath the fern may be shining now if we could see them, like the icy dewdrops on the leaves, but they are still, and all is still. And so, the lights growing larger, and the trees falling back before us, and closing up again behind us, as if to forbid retreat, we come to the house. There is probably a smell of roasted chestnuts and other good comfortable things all the time, for we are telling winter stories, ghost stories or more shame for us, round the Christmas fire, and we have never stirred except to draw a little nearer to it. But no matter for that. We came to the house, and it is an old house full of great chimneys where wood is burnt on ancient dogs upon the hearth, and grim portraits, some of them with grim legends too, lower distrustfully from the oaken panels of the walls. We are a middle-aged nobleman, and we make a generous supper with our host and hostess and their guests, it being Christmas time, and the old house full of company, and then we go to bed. Our room is a very old room. It is hung with tapestry. We don't like the portrait of a cavalier in green over the fireplace. There are great black beams in the ceiling, and there is a great black bedstead, supported at the foot by two great black figures, who seem to have come off a couple of tombs in the old baronial church in the park, for our particular accommodation. But we are not a superstitious nobleman, and we don't mind. Well, we dismiss our servant, lock the door, and sit before the fire in our dressing-gown, musing about a great many things. At length we go to bed. Well, we can't sleep. We toss and tumble and can't sleep. The embers on the hearth burn fitfully and make the room look ghostly. We can't help peeping out over the counterpane at the two black figures and the cavalier, that wicked-looking cavalier in green. In the flickering light they seem to advance and retire, which, though we are not by any means a superstitious nobleman, is not agreeable. Well, we get nervous, more and more nervous. We say, "This is very foolish, but we can't stand this. We'll pretend to be ill and knock up somebody." Well, we're just going to do it when the locked door opens, and there comes in a young woman, deadly pale, and with long fair hair, who glides to the fire and sits down in the chair we have left there, wringing her hands. Then we notice that her clothes are wet. Our tongue cleaves to the roof of our mouth, and we can't speak. But we observe her accurately. Her clothes are wet. Her long hair is dabbled with moist mud. She is dressed in the fashion of 200 years ago, and she has at her girdle a bunch of rusty keys. Well, there she sits, and we can't even faint, we're in such a state about it. Presently she gets up and tries all the locks in the room with the rusty keys, which won't fit one of them. Then she fixes her eyes on the portrait of the cavalier in green, and says, in a low, terrible voice, "The stags know it." After that she wrings her hands again, passes the bedside, and goes out at the door. We hurry on our dressing-gown, seize our pistols. We always travel with pistols, and are following, when we find the door locked. We turn the key, look out into the dark gallery. No one there. We wander away and try to find our servant. Can't be done. We pace the gallery till daybreak, then return to our deserted room, fall asleep, and are awakened by our servant. Nothing ever haunts him. And the shining sun. Well, we make a wretched breakfast, and all the company say we look queer. After breakfast we go over the house with our host, and then we take him to the portrait of the Cavalier in green, and then it all comes out. He was false to a young housekeeper once attached to that family, and famous for her beauty, who drowned herself in a pond, and whose body was discovered after a long time, because the stags refused to drink of the water. Since which it has been whispered that she traverses the house at midnight, but goes especially to that room where the Cavalier in green was wont to sleep, trying the old locks with the rusty keys. Well, we tell our host of what we have seen, and a shade comes over his features, and he begs it may be hushed up, and so it is. But it's all true, and we said so before we died, we are dead now, to many responsible people. There is no end to the old houses with resounding galleries, and dismal state bedchambers, and haunted wings shut up for many years, through which we may ramble with an agreeable creeping up our back, and encounter any number of ghosts. But it is worthy of remark, perhaps, reducible to a very few general types and classes, for ghosts have little originality, and walk in a beaten track. Thus it comes to pass that a certain room in a certain old hall, where a certain bad lord, baronet, knight, or gentleman shot himself, has certain planks in the floor from which the blood will not be taken out. You may scrape and scrape, as the present owner has done, or grandfather did, or burn and burn with strong acids, as his great-grandfather did, but there the blood will still be, no redder and no paler, no more and no less, always just the same. Thus, in such another house there is a haunted door that never will keep open, or another door that never will keep shut, or a haunted sound of a spinning wheel, or a hammer, or a footstep, or a cry, or a sigh, or a horse's tramp, or the rattling of a chain. Or else there is a turret clock which, at the midnight hour, strikes 13, when the head of the family is going to die. Or a shadowy, immovable black carriage, which at such a time is always seen by somebody, waiting near the great gates in the stable-yard. Or thus it came to pass how Lady Mary went to pay a visit at a large wild house in the Scottish Highlands, and being fatigued with her long journey, retired to bed early, and innocently said next morning at the breakfast table, "How odd to have so late a party last night in this remote place, and not to tell me of it before I went to bed." Then every one asked Lady Mary what she meant. Then Lady Mary replied, "Why, all night long the carriages were driving round and round the terrace underneath my window." Then the owner of the house turned pale, and so did his lady, and Charles MacDoodle of Macdoodle signed to Lady Mary to say no more, and every one was silent. After breakfast, Charles MacDoodle told Lady Mary that it was a tradition in the family that those rumbling carriages on the terrace betokened death. And so it proved, for 2 months afterwards the lady of the mansion died. And Lady Mary, who was a maid of honour at court, often told this story to the old Queen Charlotte, by this token that the old king always said, "Eh? Eh? What? What? Ghosts? Ghosts? No such thing. No such thing," and never left off saying so until he went to bed. Or a friend of somebody's whom most of us know, when he was a young man at college, had a particular friend with whom he made the compact that, if it were possible for the spirit to return to this earth after its separation from the body, he of the twain who first died should reappear to the other. In course of time this compact was forgotten by our friend, the two young men having progressed in life and taken diverging paths that were wide asunder. But one night, many years afterwards, our friend being in the north of England, and staying for the night in an inn on the Yorkshire moors, happened to look out of bed, and there, in the moonlight, leaning on a bureau near the window, steadfastly regarding him, saw his old college friend. The appearance being solemnly addressed, replied in a kind of whisper, but very audibly, "Do not come near me. I am dead. I am here to redeem my promise. I come from another world, but may not disclose its secrets." Then the whole form becoming paler, melted, as it were, into the moonlight, and faded away. Or there was the daughter of the first occupier of the picturesque Elizabethan house, so famous in our neighbourhood. You have heard about her? No? Why, she went out one summer evening at twilight, when she was a beautiful girl, just 17 years of age, to gather flowers in the garden, and presently came running, terrified, into the hall to her father, saying, "Oh, dear father, I have met myself!" He took her in his arms, and told her it was fancy. But she said, "Oh, no, I met myself in the broad walk, and I was pale and gathering withered flowers, and I turned my head and held them up." And that night she died. And a picture of her story was begun, though never finished, and they say it is somewhere in the house to this day, with its face to the wall. Or the uncle of my brother's wife was riding home on horseback one mellow evening at sunset, when, in a green lane close to his own house, he saw a man standing before him, in the very centre of a narrow way. "Why does that man in the cloak stand there?" he thought. "Does he want me to ride over him?" But the figure never moved. He felt a strange sensation at seeing it so still, but slackened his trot and rode forward. When he was so close to it as almost to touch it with his stirrup, his horse shied, and the figure glided up the bank in a curious, unearthly manner, backward, and without seeming to use its feet, and was gone. The uncle of my brother's wife, exclaiming, "Good heaven! It's my cousin Harry from Bombay," put spurs to his horse, which was suddenly in a profuse sweat, and, wondering at such strange behaviour, dashed round to the front of his house. There he saw the same figure just passing in at the long French window of the drawing-room, opening on the ground. He threw his bridle to a servant, and hastened in after it. His sister was sitting there alone. "Alice, where's my cousin Harry?" "Your cousin Harry, John?" "Yes, from Bombay. I met him in the lane just now, and saw him enter here, this instant." Not a creature had been seen by any one, and in that hour and minute, as it afterwards appeared, this cousin died in India. Or it was a certain sensible old maiden lady who died at 99 and retained her faculties to the last, who really did see the orphan boy, a story which has often been incorrectly told, but, of which the real truth is this, because it is, in fact, a story belonging to our family, and she was a connection of our family. When she was about 40 years of age, and still an uncommonly fine woman, her lover died young, which was the reason why she never married, though she had many offers. She went to stay at a place in Kent, which her brother, an Indian merchant, had newly bought. There was a story that this place had once been held in trust by the guardian of a young boy, who was himself the next heir, and who killed the young boy by harsh and cruel treatment. She knew nothing of that. It has been said that there was a cage in her bedroom in which the guardian used to put the boy. There was no such thing. There was only a closet. She went to bed, made no alarm whatever in the night, and in the morning said composedly to her maid when she came in, "Who is the pretty, forlorn-looking child who has been peeping out of that closet all night?" The maid replied by giving a loud scream and instantly decamping. She was surprised, but she was a woman of remarkable strength of mind, and she dressed herself and went downstairs, and closeted herself with her brother. "Now, Walter," she said, "I have been disturbed all night by a pretty, forlorn-looking boy, who has been constantly peeping out of that closet in my room, which I can't open. This is some trick." "I'm afraid not, Charlotte," said he, "for it is the legend of the house. It is the orphan boy. What did he do?" "He opened the door softly," she said, "and peeped out. Sometimes he came a step or two into the room. Then I called to him to encourage him, and he shrunk and shuddered and crept in again and shut the door." "The closet has no communication, Charlotte," said her brother, "with any other part of the house, and it's nailed up." This was undeniably true, and it took 2 carpenters a whole forenoon to get it open for examination. Then she was satisfied that she had seen the orphan boy. But the wild and terrible part of the story is that he was also seen by 3 of her brother's sons in succession, who all died young. On the occasion of each child being taken ill, he came home in a heat 12 hours before, and said, "Oh, mamma, he had been playing under a particular oak tree in a certain meadow with a strange boy, a pretty forlorn-looking boy, who was very timid and made signs." From fatal experience, the parents came to know that this was the orphan boy, and that the course of that child whom he chose for his little playmate was surely run. Legion is the name of the German castles where we sit up alone to wait for the spectre, where we are shown into a room made comparatively cheerful for our reception, where we glance round at the shadows thrown on the blank walls by the crackling fire, where we feel very lonely when the village innkeeper and his pretty daughter have retired, after laying down a fresh store of wood upon the hearth, and setting forth on the small table such supper cheer as a cold roast capon, bread, grapes, and a flask of old Rhine wine, where the reverberating doors close on their retreat one after another, like so many peals of sullen thunder, and where, about the small hours of the night, we come into the knowledge of divers supernatural mysteries. Legion is the name of the haunted German students, in whose society we draw yet nearer to the fire, while the schoolboy in the corner opens his eyes wide and round, and flies off the footstool he has chosen for his seat when the door accidentally blows open. Vast is the crop of such fruit shining on our Christmas tree, in blossom almost at the very top, ripening all down the boughs. Among the later toys and fancies hanging there, as idle often and less pure, be the images once associated with the sweet old waits, the softened music in the night ever unalterable. encircled by the social thoughts of Christmas time, still let the benignant figure of my childhood stand unchanged. In every cheerful image and suggestion that the season brings, may the bright star that rested above the poor roof be the star of all the Christian world. A moment's pause, O vanishing tree, of which the lower boughs are dark to me as yet, and let me look once more. I know there are blank spaces on thy branches, where eyes that I have loved have shone and smiled, from which they are departed. But far above I see the razor of the dead girl and the widow's son, and God is good. If age be hiding for me in the unseen portion of thy downward growth, oh, may I, with a grey head, turn a child's heart to that figure yet, and a child's trustfulness and confidence. Now the tree is decorated with bright merriment and song and dance and cheerfulness, and they are welcome. Innocent and welcome be they ever held beneath the branches of the Christmas tree, which cast no gloomy shadow. But as it sinks into the ground, I hear a whisper going through the leaves. This in commemoration of the law of love and kindness, mercy and compassion. This in remembrance of me. End of A Christmas Tree by Charles Dickens. Recording by Ruth Golding. Christmas 2008.
Christmas Is A-Comin by Paul Laurence Dunbar, read in English. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Bones are getting achy, back are feeling cold. Hands are growing shaky just like I was old. Frost upon the meadow looking mighty white. Snowdrapes like a feather slipping down at night. Just keep things a-humming, spite of frost and showers. Christmas is a-comin', and all the week is ours. Little Massa axin' who is Santa Claus makes it kinda taxing not to break the laws. Children's powerful trying to a person's grace. When do you go a-pryin' right on through your face? Down among your feelings, just pairs like that you gotta change your dealings so's to tell 'em true. My pickaninny dreamin' in his sleep. Come beyond, Mama Jenny, come and take a peep. Oh, Mas Bob and Missus in the house up there got no child like this. There ain't none anywhere. Sleep, my little lammy, sleep, you little limb. He do know what Mammy done saved up for him. There'll be banjo picking, dancing all night through. There'll be lots of chicken, plenty turkey too. Dreams to wet your whistle, so's to dry our chills. What I care for drizzles falling on the hills? Just keep things a-humming, spite of calling shores. Christmas Day's a-comin', and all the week is ours. End of Christmas Is A-Comin' by Paul Laurence Dunbar, read by Joseph Finkberg.
Christmas 1873 by George MacDonald, read in English. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Christmas days are still in store. Will they change, still faded hither, or come fresh as heretofore, summering all our winter weather? Surely they will keep their bloom, all the countless pacing ages, in the country whence they come. Children only are the sages. Hither every hour and year, children come to cure our oldness, oft, alas, to gather seer, unbelief and earthly boldness. Men they grow, and women cold, selfish, passionate, and plaining, ever faster they grow old. On the world eld is gaining. child whose childhood ne'er departs, Jesus with the perfect Father. Drive the age from parents' hearts, to thy heart the children gather. Send thy birth into our souls, with its grand and tender story. Hark, the gracious thunder rolls, news to men, to God all glory. End of Christmas, 1873, by George MacDonald.
A Christmas Carol by William Topaz McGonagall, read in English. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Welcome, sweet Christmas, blessed be the morn that Christ our Saviour was born, Earth's Redeemer, to save us from all danger, and, as the Holy Record tells, born in a manger. Chorus. Then ring, ring Christmas bells, till your sweet music o'er the kingdom swells, to warn the people to respect the morn that Christ their Saviour was born. The snow was on the ground when Christ was born, and the Virgin Mary his mother felt very forlorn, as she lay in a horse's stall at a roadside inn, till Christ our Saviour was born to free us from sin. Oh, think of the Virgin Mary as she lay in a lowly stable on a bed of hay, and angels watching o'er her till Christ was born. Therefore all the people should respect Christmas morn. The way to respect Christmas time is not by drinking whiskey or wine, but to sing praises to God on Christmas morn, the time that Jesus Christ, his Son, was born, whom he sent into the world to save sinners from hell, and by believing in him in heaven we'll dwell. Then blessed be the morn that Christ was born, who can save us from hell, death, and scorn. Then he warned, and respect the Saviour dear, and treat with less respect the new year, and respect always the blessed morn that Christ our Saviour was born. For each new morn to the Christian is dear, as well as the morn of the new year, and he thanks God for the light of each new morn, especially the morn that Christ was born. Therefore, good people, be warned in time, and on Christmas morn don't get drunk with wine, but praise God above on Christmas morn, who sent his Son to save us from hell and scorn. There, the heavenly babe, he lay in a stall among a lot of hay, while the angel host by Bethlehem sang a beautiful and heavenly anthem. Christmas time ought to be held most dear, much more so than the new year, because that's the time that Christ was born. Therefore respect Christmas morn, and let the rich be kind to the poor, and think of the hardships they do endure, who are neither clothed nor fed, and many without a blanket to their bed. End of A Christmas Carol by William Topaz McGonagall, read by Joseph Finkberg.
Christmas Eve on Lonesome by John Fox, Jr. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda McDaniel. Christmas Eve on Lonesome by John Fox, Jr. It was Christmas Eve on Lonesome, but nobody on Lonesome knew it was Christmas Eve, although a child of the outer world could have guessed it. Even out in those wilds where Lonesome slipped from one lone log cabin high up in the steeps, down through a stretch of jungle darkness to another lone cabin at the mouth of the stream. There was the holy hush in the gray twilight that comes only on Christmas Eve. There were the big flakes of snow that fell as they never fall except on Christmas Eve. There was a snowy man on horseback in a big coat, and with saddle pockets that might have been bursting with toys for children in the little cabin at the head of the stream. but not even he knew it was Christmas Eve. He was thinking of Christmas Eve, but it was of the Christmas Eve of the year before, when he sat in prison with 100 other men in stripes and listened to the chaplain talk of peace and goodwill to all men upon earth, when he had forgotten all men upon earth but one, and had only hatred in his heart for him. "Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord." That was what the chaplain had thundered at him, and then, as now, he thought of the enemy who had betrayed him to the law, and had sworn away his liberty, and had robbed him of everything in life except a fierce longing for the day when he could strike back and strike to kill. And then, while he looked back hard into the chaplain's eyes, and now, while he splashed through the yellow mud thinking of that Christmas Eve, Buck shook his head. And then as now his sullen heart answered, "Mine." The big flakes drifted to crotch and twig and limb. They gathered on the brim of Buck's slouch hat, filled out the wrinkles of his big coat, whitened his hair and his long mustache, and sifted into the yellow twisting path that guided his horse's feet. High above he could see through the whirling snow now and then the gleam of a red star. He knew it was the light from his enemy's window, but somehow the chaplain's voice kept ringing in his ears, and every time he saw the light he couldn't help thinking of the story of the star that the chaplain had told that Christmas Eve. And he dropped his eyes by and by so as not to see it again, and rode on until the light shone in his face. Then he led his horse up a little ravine and hitched it among the snowy holly and rhododendrons and slipped toward the light. There was a dog somewhere, of course, and like a thief he climbed over the low rail fence and stole through the tall snow-wet grass until he leaned against an apple tree with the sill of the window 2 feet above the level of his eyes. Reaching above him, he caught a stout limb and dragged himself up to a crotch of the tree. A mass of snow slipped softly to the earth. The branch creaked above the light wind. Around the corner of the house a dog growled, and he sat still. He had waited 3 long years, and he had ridden 2 hard nights and lain out 2 cold days in the woods for this. And presently he reached out very carefully and noiselessly broke leaf and branch and twig until a passage was cleared for his eye and for the point of the pistol that was gripped in his right hand. A woman was just disappearing through the kitchen door, and he peered cautiously and saw nothing but darting shadows. From one corner a shadow loomed suddenly out in human shape. Buck saw the shadow gesture of an arm, and he cocked his pistol. That shadow was his man, and in a moment he would be in a chair in the chimney corner to smoke his pipe maybe, his last pipe. Buck's smile, pure hatred made him smile. But it was mean, a mean and sorry thing to shoot this man in the back, dog though he was, and now that the moment had come, a wave of sickening shame ran through Buck. No one of his name had ever done that before, but this man and his people had, and with their own lips they had framed palliation for him. What was fair for one was fair for the other, they always said. A poor man couldn't fight money in the courts, and so they had shot from the brush, and that was why they were rich now and Buck was poor, why his enemy was safe at home and he was out here homeless in the apple tree. Buck thought of all this, but it was no use. The shadow slouched suddenly and disappeared, and Buck was glad. With a gritting oath between his chattering teeth, he pulled his pistol in and thrust one leg down to swing from the tree. He would meet him face to face next day and kill him like a man. And there he hung as rigid as though the cold had suddenly turned him blood, bones, and marrow into ice. The door had opened, and full in the firelight stood the girl he had heard was dead. He knew now how and why that word was sent him, and now she who had been his sweetheart stood before him, the wife of the man he meant to kill. Her lips moved. He thought he could tell what she said. "Get up, Jim, get up." Then she went back. A flame flared up within him, now that must have come straight from the devil's forge. Again the shadows played over the ceiling. His teeth grated as he cocked his pistol and pointed it down the beam of light that shot into the heart of the apple tree, and waited. The shadow of a head shot along the rafters and over the fireplace. It was a madman clutching the butt of the pistol now, and as his eye caught the glinting sight and his heart thumped, there stepped into the square light of the window a child. It was a boy with yellow tumbled hair, and he had a puppy in his arms. In front of the fire the little fellow dropped the dog, and they began to play. Yap, yap, yap. Buck could hear the shrill barking of the fat little dog and the joyous shrieks of the child as he made his playfellow chase his tail around and around or tumbled him head over heels on the floor. It was the first child Buck had seen for 3 years. It was his child and hers, and in the apple tree Buck watched fixedly. They were down on the floor now, rolling over and over together, and he watched them until the child grew tired and turned his face to the fire and lay still, looking into it. Buck could see his eyes close presently, and then the puppy crept closer, put his head on his playmate's chest, and the two lay thus asleep. And still Buck looked, his clasp loosening on his pistol and his lips loosening under his stiff mustache, and kept looking until the door opened again and the woman crossed the floor. A flood of light flashed suddenly on the snow, barely touching the snow-hung tips of the apple tree, and he saw her in the doorway, saw her look anxiously into the darkness, look and listen a long while. Buck dropped noiselessly to the snow when she closed the door. He wondered what they would think when they saw his tracks in the snow next morning, and then he realized they would be covered before morning. As he started up the ravine where his horse was, he heard the clink of metal down the road and the splash of a horse's hoofs in the soft mud, and he sank down behind a holly bush. Again the light from the cabin flashed out on the snow. "That you, Jim?" "Yep." And then the child's voice, "Azu dat thump dandy?" "Yep." The cheery answer rang out almost at Buck's ear, and Jim passed death waiting for him behind the bush which his left foot brushed, shaking the snow from the red berries down on the crouching figure beneath. Once only, far down the dark jungled way, with the underlying streak of yellow that was leading him whither, God only knew. Once only Buck looked back. There was the red light gleaming faintly through the moonlit flakes of snow. Once more he thought of the star, and once more the chaplain's voice came back to him. "Mine, saith the Lord." Just how, Buck could not see, with himself in the snow, and him back there for life with her and the child, but some strange impulse made him bare his head. "Yourn," said Buck grimly. But nobody on Lonesome, not even Buck, knew that it was Christmas Eve. End of Christmas Eve on Lonesome by John Fox, Jr. Recording by Linda McDaniel, Atlanta, Georgia, November 2008.
The Coventry Carol, a 16th century Christmas carol, author and composer unknown. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Ruth Golding, Christmas 2008. Luli, lule, thou little tiny child. Bye, bye, luli, lule, thou little tiny child. Bye, bye, luli, lule. Oh, sisters too, how may we do for to preserve this day, this poor youngling, for whom we do sing. Bye, bye, luli, lule. Herod the king in his raging charged he hath this day his men of might in his young children to slay. That woe is me, poor child, for thee, and ever mourn and say for thy parting, neither say nor sing. Bye bye, Luli, lulay. End of the Coventry Carol.
In the Bleak Midwinter is a Christmas Carol. The Christmas poem was written by Christina Rossetti and later published in the 1906 English hymnal with a setting by Gustav Holst. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This carol will be sung in English and recorded by Carol Stripling. In the bleak midwinter, frosty wind made moan. Earth stood hard as iron, water like a stone. Snow had fallen, snow on snow, snow on snow. In the bleak midwinter, long ago. Our God, heaven cannot hold him, nor earth sustain. Heaven and earth shall flee away when he comes to reign. In the bleak midwinter, a stable place sufficed. The Lord God Almighty, Jesus Christ. Enough for him whom cherubim worship night and day, a breast full of milk and a manger full of hay. Enough for him whom angels fall down before, the ox and ass and camel which adore. Angels and archangels may have gathered there, cherubim and seraphim thronged the air, but only his mother in her maiden bliss worshipped the beloved with a kiss. What can I give him, poor as I am? If I were a shepherd, I would bring a lamb. of In the Bleak Midwinter by Rossetti and Holst.
The Gospel according to St. Luke, chapter 2, verses 1 to 20, in the translation made by William Tyndall, first printed in 1526. Read in English. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. And it chanced in those days that there went out a commandment from August the Emperor that all the world should be taxed. And this taxing was the first, and executed when Cyrenius was lieutenant in Syria. And every man went unto his own city to be taxed. And Joseph also ascended from Galilee, out of a city called Nazareth, into Jewry, unto the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be taxed with Mary, his spoused wife, which was with child. And it fortuned, while they were there, her time was come that she should be delivered. And she brought forth her first begotten son, and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them within the inn. And there were in the same region shepherds abiding in the field, and watching their flock by night. And lo, the angel of the Lord stood hard by there, and the brightness of the Lord shone round about them, and they were sore afraid. But the angel said unto them, Be not afraid, for behold, I bring you tidings of great joy, that shall come to all the people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Saviour, which is Christ the Lord. And take this for a sign, ye shall find the child swaddled and laid in a manger. And straightway there was with the angel a multitude of heavenly soldiers, lauding God, and saying, Glory to God on high, and peace on the earth, and unto men rejoicing. And it fortuned, as soon as the angels were gone away from them into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, Let us go even unto Bethlehem, and see this thing that is happened, which the Lord hath showed unto us. And they came with haste, and found Mary and Joseph and the babe laid in a manger. And when they had seen it, they published abroad the saying which was told them of that child. And all that heard it wondered at those things which were told of the shepherds. But Mary kept all those sayings, and pondered them in her heart. And the shepherds returned praising and lauding God, for all that they had heard and seen, even as it was told unto them. End of the Gospel according to St. Luke, chapter 2, verses 1 to 20.
Poor Santa Claus by Judd Mortimer Lewis, read in English. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. I've always had a notion. I wished I was Santa Claus. I have always had a notion I would like to be, because it would be such fun going down the chimneys all around, tiptoeing into bedrooms, stopping at each little sound, with my ears pricked up to listen for the little fella's tread, peeking out between the curtains, peeking into each wee bed, harking to the talk of daytimes of each eager little tyke, and then Christmas, fetching to 'em all the pretty things they like. I have always had a notion I would like to get his mail, and read every little letter till the stars got dim and pale, every morning. I imagine he gets just the quaintest pile of wee notes, that it's no wonder that he always wears a smile. But I've also got a notion, just a sort of faint surmise, I can see a little sorrow way back in his laughing eyes. And it's that there look of sorrow gets me feeling glad, because I'm only me, and do not have to be Santa Claus. I'm a fool, for when the presents had been scattered everywhere, and been clasped to breasts of babies with night's tangles in their hair, when 'twas the day after Christmas, the morn after Christmas morn, with the glad girls with their dollies, with the boys each with a horn, with the sun a-shining brightly, and with glorious New Year's Day seeming to wait for us laughing only just a week away, I would turn from it a-sighing, put my empty knapsack by, and wish I could take my smile off and go off somewhere and cry. Cry for letters all unanswered, cry for stockings all unfilled, for child voices raised in hoping, now in disappointment stilled. I should want to go off somewhere by my lonesome just to grieve for the little bits of stockings hanging empty Christmas Eve, that would hang empty and cheerless by the cold grate in the morn, when with joy the world was ringing and the Christmas Day was born. I would feel bad for the babies with their little cheeks tear-wet, standing, grieving Christmas morning, thinking Santa could forget. I am glad that I'm not Santa, glad that I don't have to be. There won't be no little babies Christmas morning blaming me, 'cause their little baby stockings were all empty in the light of the morning, that were hung up filled with hoping overnight. I can feel bad and be grieving all of Christmas Day because of the disappointed babies, without being Santa Claus. And if I was him, I reckon I could never play the part, for the thought of them I couldn't ever reach would break my heart. End of Poor Santa Claus by Judd Mortimer Lewis, read by Joseph Finkberg.
Reginald on Christmas Presents by H. H. Munro, read in English. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. I wish it to be distinctly understood, said Reginald, that I don't want a George Prince of Wales prayer book as a Christmas present. The fact cannot be too widely known. There ought, he continued, to be technical education classes on the science of present giving. No one seems to have the faintest notion of what anyone else wants, and the prevalent ideas on the subject are not creditable to a civilized community. There is, for instance, the female relative in the country who knows a tie is always useful, and sends you some spotted horror that you could only wear in secret or in Tottenham Court Road. It might have been useful had she kept it to tie up currant bushes with, when it would have served the double purpose of supporting the branches and frightening away the birds, for it is an admitted fact that the ordinary tomtit of commerce has a sounder aesthetic taste than the average female relative in the country. Then there are aunts. They are always a difficult class to deal with in the matter of presents. The trouble is that one never catches them really young enough. By the time one has educated them to an appreciation of the fact that one does not wear red woollen mittens in the West End, they die, or quarrel with the family, or do something equally inconsiderate. That is why the supply of trained aunts is always so precarious. There is my Aunt Agatha, par exemple, who sent me a pair of gloves last Christmas, and even got so far as to choose a kind that was being worn, and had the correct number of buttons. But they were 9s. I sent them to a boy whom I hated intimately. He didn't wear them, of course, but he could have. That was where the bitterness of death came in. It was nearly as consoling as sending white flowers to his funeral. Of course I wrote and told my aunt that they were the one thing that had been wanting to make existence blossom like a rose. I am afraid she thought me frivolous. She comes from the north, where they live in the fear of heaven and the Earl of Durham. Reginald affects an exhaustive knowledge of things political, which furnishes an excellent excuse for not discussing them. Aunts with a dash of foreign extraction in them are the most satisfactory in the way of understanding these things. But if you can't choose your aunt, it is wisest in the long run to choose the present and send her the bill. Even friends of one's own set, who might be expected to know better, have curious delusions on the subject. I am not collecting copies of the cheaper editions of Omar Khayyam. I gave the last 4 that I received to the lift boy, and I like to think of him reading them with Fitzgerald's notes to his aged mother. Lift boys always have aged mothers. Shows such nice feeling on their part, I think. Personally, I can't see where the difficulty in choosing suitable presents lies. No boy who has brought himself up properly could fail to appreciate one of those decorative bottles of liqueurs that are so reverently staged in Morel's window, and it wouldn't in the least matter if one did get duplicates, and there would always be the supreme moment of dreadful uncertainty whether it was creme de menthe or chartreux, like the expectant thrill on seeing your partner's hand turned up at bridge. People may say what they like about the decay of Christianity, the religious system that produced green chartreux can never really die. And then, of course, there are liqueur glasses, and crystallized fruits, and tapestry curtains, and heaps of other necessaries of life that make really sensible presents. Not to speak of luxuries such as having one's bills paid, or getting something quite sweet in the way of jewellery. Unlike the alleged good woman of the Bible, I'm not above rubies. When found, by the way, she must have been rather a problem at Christmas time. Nothing short of a blank cheque would have fitted the situation. Perhaps it's as well that she's died out. The great charm about me, concluded Reginald, is that I am so easily pleased. But I draw the line at a Prince of Wales prayer book. End of Reginald on Christmas Presents by H. Munro.
An extract from Sermon of the Nativity, preached upon Christmas Day, 1622, by Lancelot Andrews, read in English. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. It is not commended to stand gazing up to heaven too long, not on Christ himself ascending, much less on his star. For they sat not still gazing on the star. Their vidimus begat venimus. Their seeing made them come. Come a great journey. Venimus is soon said, but a short word, but many a wide and weary step they made before they could come to say venimus. Lo, here, we are come, and at our journey's end, to look a little on it. In this their coming we consider, first, the distance of the place they came from. It was not hard by, as the shepherds, but a step to Bethlehem over the fields. This was riding many 100 miles, and cost them many a day's journey. Secondly, we consider the way that they came, if it be pleasant, or plain and easy, for if it be, this is so much the better. This was nothing pleasant, for through deserts, all the way waste and desolate. Nor, secondly, easy neither, for over the rocks and crags of both Arabias, especially Petra, their journey lay. Yet if safe, but it was not, but exceeding dangerous, as lying through the midst of the black tents of Kedar, a nation of thieves and cutthroats, to pass over the hills of robbers, infamous then, and infamous to this day, no passing without great troop or convoy. Last, we consider the time of their coming, the season of the year. It was no summer progress, a cold coming they had of it at this time of the year, just the worst time of the year to take a journey, and especially a long journey. The ways deep, the weather sharp, the days short, the sun farthest off, in solstitio brumali, the very dead of winter. Venimus, we are come. If that be one, venimus, we are now come. Come at this time, that sure is another. And these difficulties they overcame, of a wearisome, irksome, troublesome, dangerous, unseasonable journey, and for all this they came, and came it cheerfully and quickly, as appeareth by the speed they made. It was but venimus, venimus with them. They saw, and they came. No sooner saw, but they set out presently, so as upon the first appearing of the star, as it might be last night, they knew it was Balaam's star. It called them away. They made ready straight to begin their journey this morning. A sign they were highly conceited of his birth, believed some great matter of it, that they took all these pains, made all this haste, that they might be there to worship him with all the possible speed they could. Sorry for nothing so much as that they could not be there soon enough, with the very first, to do it even this day, the day of his birth. All considered, there is more in Venemus than shows at the first sight. It was not for nothing it was said in the first verse, Ecce venerunt. The coming hath an ecce on it. It well deserves it. End of extract from Sermon of the Nativity by Lancelot Andrews. This recording is in the public domain.
The Boy with the Box by Mary Griggs Van Voorhees. Read in English. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. It was an ideal Christmas day. The sun shone brightly, but the air was crisp and cold, and snow and ice lay sparkling everywhere. A light wind the night before had swept the blue, ice-bound river clean of scattering snow, and by 2 o'clock in the afternoon the broad bend near Creighton's mill was fairly alive with skaters. The girls in gay caps and scarves, the boys in sweaters and mackinaws of every conceivable hue, with here and there a plump, matronly figure in a plush coat, or a tiny fellow in scarlet, made a picture of life and brilliancy worthy of an artist's finest skill. Tom Reynolds moved in and out among the happy throng, with swift, easy strokes, his cap on the back of his curly head, and his brown eyes shining with excitement. Now and again he glanced down with pardonable pride at the brand-new skates that twinkled beneath his feet. Jolly ramblers, sure enough jolly ramblers they were. Ever since Ralph Evans had remarked, with a tantalizing toss of his handsome head, that no game fellow would try to skate on anything but jolly ramblers, Tom had yearned with an inexpressible longing for a pair of these wonderful skates. And now they were his, and the ice was fine, and the Christmas sun was shining. Tom was rounding the big bend for the 50th time, when he saw, skimming gracefully toward him through the merry crowd, a tall boy in a fur-trimmed coat, his handsome head proudly erect. "That's Ralph Evans now," said Tom to himself. "Just wait till you see these skates, old boy, and maybe you won't feel so smart." And with slow, cautious strokes, he made his way through laughing boys and girls to a place just in front of the tall skater coming toward him down the broad white way. When Ralph was almost upon him, Tom paused and, in conspicuous silence, looked down at his shining skates. "Hello," said Ralph good-naturedly, seizing Tom's arm and swinging around. Then, taking in the situation with a careless glance, he added, "Get a new pair of skates for Christmas?" "Jolly Ramblers," said Tom impressively, "the best Jolly Ramblers on the market." Ralph was a full half-head the taller, but as Tom delivered himself of this speech with his head held high, he felt every inch as tall as the boy before him. If Ralph was deeply impressed, he failed to show it, as he answered carelessly, "Huh, that's so. Pretty good little skates they are, the Jolly Ramblers." "You said no game fellow would use any other make," said Tom hotly. "Oh, bet that was nearly a year ago," said Ralph. "I got a new pair of skates for Christmas, too," he added, as if it had just occurred to him. "Clubhouse skates, something new in the market just this season. Just look at the curve of that skate, will you?" he added, lifting a foot for inspection, and that clamp that you couldn't shake off if you had to. They're guaranteed for a year, too, and if anything gives out, you get a new pair for nothing. $3.50 they cost at Mr. Harrison's hardware store. I gave my Jolly Ramblers to a kid about your size. A mighty good little skate they are." And with a long, graceful stroke, Ralph Evans skated away. And it seemed to Tom Reynolds that all his Christmas joy went skimming away behind him. The sun still shone, the ice still gleamed, the skaters laughed and sang, but Tom moved slowly on with listless, heavy strokes. The Jolly Ramblers still twinkled beneath his feet, but he looked down at them no more. What was the use of Jolly Ramblers when Ralph Evans had a pair of clubhouse skates that cost $1 more, had a graceful curve and a faultless clamp, and were guaranteed for a year? It was only 4 o'clock when Tom slipped his new skates carelessly over his shoulder and started up the bank for home. He was slouching down the main street, head down, hands thrust deep into his pockets, when, on turning a corner, he ran plump into a full moon. Now I know it is rather unusual for full moons to be walking about the streets by daylight, but that is the only adequate description of the round, freckled face that beamed at Tom from behind a great box held by 2 sturdy arms. "That came pretty near being a collision," said the owner of the full moon, still beaming, as he set down the box and leaned against a building to rest a moment. "Nobody hurt, I guess," said Tom. "Been down to the ice?" asked the boy eagerly. "I could see the skaters from Patton's store. Oh, I see you got some new skates for Christmas. Ain't they beauties now?" And he beamed on the despised Jolly Ramblers with his heart in his little blue eyes. "A pretty good little pair of skates," said Tom, in Ralph's condescending tone. "Good! Well, I should guess, yes! And Christmas ice just made a purpose." In spite of his ill humor, Tom could not help responding to the warm interest of the shabby boy at his side. He knew him to be Harvey McGinnis, the son of a poor Irish widow, who worked at Patton's department store out of school hours. Looking at the great box with an awakening interest, he remarked kindly, "What you been doing with yourself on Christmas Day?" "Want to know, sure enough?" said Harvey mysteriously, his round face beaming more brightly than ever. "Well, I've been doing the Santa Claus act down at Patton's store. About a week ago," he went on, leaning back easily against the tall building and thrusting his hands down deep into his well-worn pockets. "About a week ago, as I was cleaning out the storeroom, I came on 3 big boxes with broken dolls in 'em. Beauties they were, I can tell you. The Lady Jane in a blue silk dress, the Lady Clarabelle in pink, and the Lady Matilda in shimmerin' white. Nothin' wrong with 'em either, only broken rubbers that put their j'ints out of whack and set their heads a-rollin' this way and that. They could be fixed in no time, I says to myself, and what a prize they'd be for the kids, to be sure. For Mom and me had racked our brains considerable how we'd scrape together the money for Christmas things for the girls. So I went to the boss and I asked him right out what he'd charge me for the 3 ladies just as they was. And he says, 'Jimmy,' he says, I've told him me name a dozen times, but he allus calls me Jimmy. 'Jimmy,' he says, 'if you'll come down on Christmas Day and help me take down the fixin's and fix up the store for regular trade, I'll give you the dolls for nothin',' he says. So I explained to the kids that Santy'd be late to our house this year, with so many to see after it wouldn't be strange, and went down to the store early this morning and finished me work and fixed up the ladies as good as new. Would you like to be seein' 'em now?" he added, turning to the great box with a look of pride. "Sure I'd like to see 'em," said Tom. With careful, almost reverent touch, Harvey untied the string and opened the large box, disclosing 3 smaller boxes, one above the other. Opening the first box, he revealed a really handsome doll in a blue silk dress, with large dark eyes that opened and shut, and dark curling locks of real hair. "This is the Lady Jane," he said, smoothing her gay frock with gentle fingers. "We're going to give her to Kitty. Kitty's hair is pretty and curly, but she hates it 'cause it's red, and she thinks black hair is the prettiest kind in the world. Ain't it funny how all of us will be wantin' what we don't have ourselves?" Tom did not reply to this bit of philosophy, but he laid a repentant hand on the Jolly Ramblers, as if he knew he had wronged them in his heart. "That's as handsome a doll as ever I saw, and no mistake," he said. Pleased with this praise, Harvey opened the second box and disclosed the Lady Matilda, with fair golden curls and a dress of shimmerin' white. "The Lady Matilda goes to Josephine," said Harvey. "Josephine has black hair straight as a string, and won't she laugh, though, to see them fetchin' yellow curls?" "She surely ought to be glad," said Tom. The Lady Clarabelle was another fair-haired lady in a gown of the brightest pink. "This here beauty's for the baby," said Harvey, his eyes glowing. "She don't care if the hair's black or yellow, but won't that stunnin' dress make her eyes pop out?" "They'll surely believe in Santy when they see those beauties," said Tom. "That's just what I was sayin' to Mom this morning," said Harvey. "Kitty's had some doubts. She's almost 9. But when she sees those fine ladies, she'll be dead sure Mom and I didn't buy 'em. If I had a Santa Claus suit, I'd dress up and hand 'em out myself." Tom's face lighted with a bright idea. "My brother Bob's got a Santa Claus suit that he used in a show last Christmas," he said. "Say, let me dress up and play Santa for you. The girls would never guess who I was." "Wouldn't they stare, though?" said Harvey delightedly. "But do you think you'd want to take time?" he asked apologetically. "And you with a new pair of skates and the ice like this?" "Of course I want to if you'll let me," said Tom. "I'll skate down the river and meet you anywhere you say." "Out in our backyard, then, at 7 o'clock," said Harvey. "All right, I'll be there." And with head up and skates clinking, Tom hurried away. It was a flushed, excited boy who burst into the Reynolds' quiet sitting room a few minutes later, with his skates still hanging on his shoulder and his cap in his hand. "Say, Mother," he cried, "can I have Bob's Santa Claus suit this evening, please? I'm going to play Santa Claus for Harvey McGinnis." "Play Santa Claus for Harvey McGinnis? What do you mean, child?" "You know Mrs. McGinnis, Mother, that poor woman who lives in the little house by the river. Her husband got killed on the railroad last winter, you know. Well, Harvey, her boy, has fixed up some grand-looking dolls for his sisters, and he wants me to come out and play Santa tonight." And Tom launched out into a long story about Harvey and his good fortune. "He must be a splendid boy," said Mrs. Reynolds heartily, "and I am sure I shall be glad to have you go." "And another thing, Mother," said Tom, hesitating a little. "Do you think Grandma would care if I spent part of that $5 she gave me for a pair of skates for Harvey? He hasn't any skates at all, and I know he'd just love to have some." "It is generous of you to think of it," said his mother, much pleased. "And you would still have 2.5 for that little trip down to Grandma's." "But I'd like to get him some clubhouse skates," said Tom. "They're a new kind that cost $3.50. "But I thought you said the Jolly Ramblers were the best skates made." Mrs. Reynolds looked somewhat hurt as she glanced from Tom to the skates on his shoulder and back to Tom again. "They are, Mother. They're just dandies," said Tom, blushing with shame that he could ever have despised his mother's gift. But these clubhouse skates are just the kind for Harvey. You see, Harvey's shoes are old and worn, and these clubhouse skates have clamps that you can't shake loose if you have to. Then if anything happens to them before the year's up, you get a new pair free. And Harvey, you know, wouldn't have any money to be fixing skates. "Well, do as you like," said Mrs. Reynolds, pleased with Tom's eagerness, for such a spell of generosity was something new in her selfish younger son. "But remember, you will have to wait a while for your visit to Grandma." "All right, and thank you, Mother," said Tom. "You can buy the skates down at Harrison's, and I'm going over and ask Mr. Harrison if he won't open up the store and get a pair for me for a special time like this. I'm most sure he will." And away he flew. That evening at 7, as the moon was rising over the eastern hills, a short, portly Santa Claus stepped out of the dry reeds by the river bank and walked with wonderfully nimble feet right into the McGinnis's little backyard. As he neared the small back porch, a dark figure rose to greet him, one hand held up in warning, the other holding at arm's length a bulky grain sack full to the brim. "Here's your pack, Sandy," he whispered gleefully. "They're all waitin' in the front room yonder. I'll slip in the back way whilst you go round and give a good thump at the front door, and Mom'll let you in." Trembling with eagerness, Tom tiptoed round the house, managing to slip an oblong package into the capacious depths of the big sack as he did so. Thump! Thump! How his knock re-echoed in the frosty air! The door swung wide, and Mrs. McGinnis's gaunt figure stood before him. "Good evening, Santy. Come right in," she said. Tom had always thought what a homely woman Harvey's mother was when he happened to meet her at the grocery, with her thin red hair drawn severely back from her gaunt face, and a black shawl over her head. But as he looked up into her big, kind face so full of Christmas sunshine, he wondered he could ever have thought her anything but lovely. The room was small and bare, but wonderfully gay with pine and bits of red and green crepe paper, saved from the fixins at the store. And on a large bed in the corner sat the 3 little girls, Kitty with her bright curls bobbing, Josephine with her black braids sticking straight out, and the baby with tiny blue eyes that twinkled and shone like Harvey's. The fine speech that Tom had been saying over to himself for the past 2 hours seemed to vanish into thin air before this excited little audience. But in faltering, stammering tones which everyone was too excited to notice, he managed to say something about Merry Christmas and good children, and then proceeded to open the magic sack. "Miss Kitty McGinnis," he called in deep, gruff tones. Kitty took the box he offered with shy embarrassment, slowly drew back the lid, and gave a cry of amazement and delight. "A doll! Oh, the loveliest doll that ever was!" she cried. Then, turning to her brother, she whispered as softly as excitement would permit, "Oh, Harvey, I'm afeard you paid too much." "Aw, go on," said Harvey, his face more like a full moon than ever. "Don't you know that Santy can do whatever he wants to?" The other dolls were received with raptures, Josephine stroking the golden curls of the Lady Matilda with wondering fingers, and the baby dancing round and round, waving the pink-robed Lady Clarabelle above her head. "Mr. Harvey McGinnis," came the gruff tones of Santa Claus, and Harvey smiled over to his mother as he drew out a pair of stout cloth gloves. "Mrs. McGinnis," and that good lady smiled back as she shook out a dainty white apron with a coarse embroidery ruffle. "I reckon Sandy wanted you to wear that of a Sunday afternoon," said Harvey, awkwardly. "And I'll be proud to do it," said his mother. Little sacks of candy were next produced, and everyone settled down to enjoy it, thinking that the bottom of the big sack must be reached, when Santa called out in tones that trembled beneath the gruffness, "Another package for Mr. Harvey McGinnis." "For me? What?" said Harvey, taking the heavy oblong bundle. Then, as the sparkling clubhouse skates met his view, his face lit up with a glory that Tom never forgot. The glory lasted but a moment. Then he turned a troubled face toward the bulky old saint. "You never ought to 'a' done it," he said. "These must have cost a lot." "Aw, go on," was the reply in a distinctly boyish tone. "Don't you know that Santy can do whatever he wants to?" And, with a prodigious bow, old Santa was gone. A few minutes later, a slender boy with a bundle under his arm was skating swiftly down the shining river in the moonlight. As he rounded the bend, a tall figure in a fur-trimmed coat came skimming slowly toward him, and a voice called out in Ralph Evans' condescending tones, "Well, how are the Jolly Ramblers doing tonight?" But the answer this time was clear and glad and triumphant. "The best in the world," said Tom. "And isn't this the glorious night for skating?" End of The Boy with the Box by Mary Griggs Van Voorhees. Read by Jan MacGillivray.
The Christmas Present by Richmal Crompton. Read in English. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Mary Clay looked out of the window of the old farmhouse. The view was dreary enough, hill and field and woodland, bare, colorless, mist-covered, with no other house in sight. She had never been a woman to crave for company. She liked sewing. She was passionately fond of reading. She was not fond of talking. Probably she could have been very happy at Crom Farm, alone. Before her marriage she had looked forward to the long evenings with her sewing and reading. She knew that she would be busy enough in the day, for the farmhouse was old and rambling, and she was to have no help in the housework. But she looked forward to quiet, peaceful, lamp-lit evenings. And only lately, after 10 years of married life, had she reluctantly given up the hope of them. For peace was far enough from the old farm kitchen in the evening. It was driven away by John Clay's loud voice, raised always in orders or complaints, or in the stumbling, incoherent reading aloud of his newspaper. Mary was a silent woman herself, and a lover of silence. But John liked to hear the sound of his voice. He liked to shout at her, to call for her from one room to another. Above all, he liked to hear his voice reading the paper out loud to her in the evening. She dreaded that most of all. It had lately seemed to jar on her nerves till she felt she must scream aloud. His voice, going on, raucous and sing-song, became unspeakably irritating. His "Mary," summoning her from her household work to wherever he happened to be. His "Get my slippers," or "Bring me my pipe," exasperated her almost to the point of rebellion. "Get your own slippers," had trembled on her lips, but had never passed them, for she was a woman who could not bear anger. Noise of any kind appalled her. She had borne it for 10 years, so surely she could go on with it. Yet today, as she gazed hopelessly at the wintry countryside, she became acutely conscious that she could not go on with it. Something must happen. Yet, what was there that could happen? It was Christmas next week. She smiled ironically at the thought. Then she noticed the figure of her husband coming up the road. He came in at the gate and round to the side door. "Mary!" She went slowly in answer to the summons. He held a letter in his hand. "Met the postman," he said, "from your aunt." She opened the letter and read it in silence. Both of them knew quite well what it contained. "She wants us to go over for Christmas again. said Mary. He began to grumble. "She's as deaf as a post. She's most as deaf as her mother was. She ought to know better than to ask folks over when she can't hear a word anyone says." Mary said nothing. He always grumbled about the invitation at first, but really he wanted to go. He liked to talk with her uncle. He liked the change of going down to the village for a few days and hearing all its gossip. He could quite well leave the farm to the hands for that time. The crude deafness was proverbial. Mary's great-grandmother had gone stone-deaf at the age of 35. Her daughter had inherited the affliction, and her granddaughter, the aunt with whom Mary had spent her childhood, had inherited it also at exactly the same age. "All right," he said at last, grudgingly, as though in answer to her silence. "We'd better go. Write and say we'll go." It was Christmas Eve. They were in the kitchen of her uncle's farmhouse. The deaf old woman sat in her chair by the fire knitting. Upon her sunken face there was a curious sardonic smile that was her habitual expression. The two men stood in the doorway. Mary sat at the table, looking aimlessly out of the window. Outside the snow fell in blinding showers. Inside, the fire gleamed on to the copper pots and pans, the crockery on the old oak dresser, the hams hanging from the ceiling. Suddenly James turned. "Jane!" he said. The deaf woman never stirred. "Jane!" Still there was no response upon the enigmatic old face by the fireside. "Jane!" She turned slightly towards the voice. "Get them photos from upstairs to show John," he bawled. "What about boats?" she said. "Photos!" roared her husband. "Coats?" she quavered. Mary looked from one to the other. The man made a gesture of irritation and went from the room. He came back with a pile of picture postcards in his hand. "It's quicker to do a thing oneself," he grumbled. "They're what my brother sent from Switzerland, where he's working now. It's a fine land, to judge from the views of it." John took them from his hand. "She gets worse?" he said, nodding towards the old woman. She was sitting gazing at the fire, her lips curved into the curious smile. Her husband shrugged his shoulders. "Aye, she's nigh as bad as her mother was. And her grandmother. Aye, it takes longer to tell her to do something than to do it myself. And deaf folks get a bit stupid, too. Can't see what you mean. They're best let alone." The other man nodded and lit his pipe. Then James opened the door. "The snow's stopped," he said. "Shall we go to the end of the village and back?" The other nodded and took his cap from behind the door. A gust of cold air filled the room as they went out. Mary took a paper-backed book from the table and came over to the fireplace. "Mary!" She started. It was not the sharp, querulous voice of the deaf old woman. It was more like the voice of the young aunt whom Mary remembered in childhood. The old woman was leaning forward, looking at her intently. "Mary, a happy Christmas to 'ee!" And, as if in spite of herself, Mary answered in her ordinary low tones. "The same to you, auntie." "Thank'ee, thank'ee." Mary gasped. "Aunt, can you hear me speaking like this?" The old woman laughed, silently, rocking to and fro in her chair, as if with pent-up merriment of years. "Yes, I can hear 'ee, child. I've allus heard 'ee." Mary clasped her hand eagerly. "Then you're cured, aunt?" "Aye, I'm cured as far as there was ever anything to be cured." "You?" "I was never deaf, child, nor never will be, please God. I've took you all in fine." Mary stood up in bewilderment. "You? Never deaf?" The old woman chuckled again. "No, nor my mother, nor her mother neither." Mary shrank back from her. I don't know what you mean," she said unsteadily. "Have you been pretending?" "I'll make you a Christmas present of it, dearie," said the old woman. "My mother made me a Christmas present of it when I was your age, and her mother made her one. I haven't a lass of my own to give it to, so I give it to you. It can come on quite sudden-like, if you want it, and then you can hear what you choose, and not hear what you choose. Do you see?" She leant nearer and whispered, "You're shut out of it all, of having to fetch and carry for 'em, answer their daft questions and run their errands like a dog. I've watched you, my lass. You don't get much peace, do you?" Mary was trembling. "Oh, I don't know what to think," she said. I couldn't do it." "Do what you like," said the old woman. "Take it as a present, anyways, the crew deafness for a Christmas present." She chuckled. Use it or not, as you like. You'll find it main amusin' anyways." And into the old face there came again that curious smile, as if she carried in her heart some jest fit for the gods on Olympus. The door opened suddenly with another gust of cold air, and the two men came in again covered with fine snow. I'll not do it," whispered Mary, trembling. "We didn't get far. It's coming on again," remarked John, hanging up his cap. The old woman rose and began to lay the supper, silently and deftly, moving from cupboard to table without looking up. Mary sat by the fire, motionless and speechless, her eyes fixed on the glowing coals. "Any signs of the deafness in her?" whispered James, looking towards Mary. "It come on my wife just when she was that age." "Aye, so I've heard." Then he said loudly, "Mary!" A faint pink color came into her cheeks, but she did not show by look or movement that she had heard. James looked significantly at her husband. The old woman stood still for a minute, with a cup in each hand, and smiled, her slow, subtle smile. End of The Christmas Present by Richmal Crompton. Read by Victoria Grace.
The Gift of the Magi by O. Henry. Read in English by Carol Stripling. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. $1.87. That was all, and 60 cents of it was in pennies. Pennies saved 1 and 2 at a time by bulldozing the grocer and the vegetable man and the butcher until one's cheeks burned with the silent imputation of parsimony that such close dealing implied. 3 times Della counted it. $1.87. And the next day would be Christmas. There was clearly nothing to do but flop down on the shabby little couch and howl, so Della did it, which instigates the moral reflection that life is made up of sobs, sniffles, and smiles, with sniffles predominating. While the mistress of the home is gradually subsiding from the first stage to the second, take a look at the home. A furnished flat at $8 per week. It did not exactly beggar description, but it certainly had that word on the lookout for the mendicancy squad. In the vestibule below was a letter box, into which no letter would go, and an electric button from which no mortal finger could coax a ring. Also appertaining thereunto was a card bearing the name, Mr. James Dillingham Young. The Dillingham had been flung to the breeze during a former period of prosperity when its possessor was being paid $30 per week. Now, when the income was shrunk to $20, though, they were thinking seriously of contracting to a modest and unassuming D. But whenever Mr. James Dillingham Young came home and reached his flat above, he was called Jim, and greatly hugged by Mrs. James Dillingham Young, already introduced to you as Della, which is all very good. Della finished her cry and attended to her cheeks with a powder rag. She stood by the window and looked out dully at a gray cat walking a gray fence in a gray backyard. Tomorrow would be Christmas Day, and she had only $1.87 with which to buy Jim a present. She had been saving every penny she could for months, with this result. $20 a week doesn't go far. Expenses had been greater than she had calculated. They always are. Only $1.87 to buy a present for Jim. Her Jim. Many a happy hour she had spent planning for something nice for him, something fine and rare and sterling, something just a little bit near to being worthy of the honor of being owned by Jim. There was a pier glass between the windows of the room. Perhaps you have seen a pier glass in an $8 flat. A very thin and very agile person may, by observing his reflection in a rapid sequence of longitudinal strips, obtain a fairly accurate conception of his looks. Della, being slender, had mastered the art. Suddenly she whirled from the window and stood before the glass. Her eyes were shining brilliantly, but her face had lost its color within 20 seconds. Rapidly she pulled down her hair and let it fall to its full length. Now there were 2 possessions of the James Dillingham Youngs in which they both took a mighty pride. One was Jim's gold watch that had been his father's and his grandfather's. The other was Della's hair. Had the Queen of Sheba lived in the flat across the air shaft, Della would have let her hair hang out the window some day to dry, just to depreciate Her Majesty's jewels and gifts. Had King Solomon been the janitor, with all his treasures piled up in the basement, Jim would have pulled out his watch every time he passed, just to see him pluck at his beard from envy. So now Della's beautiful hair fell about her, rippling and shining like a cascade of brown waters. It reached below her knee and made itself almost a garment for her. And then she did it up again nervously and quickly. Once she faltered for a minute and stood still, while a tear or two splashed on the worn red carpet. On went her old brown jacket, on went her old brown hat, and with a whirl of skirts and with the brilliant sparkle still in her eyes, she fluttered out the door and down the stairs to the street. Where she stopped, the sign read, Madame Sofronie, hair goods of all kinds. One flight up Della ran, and collected herself, panting. Madame, large, too white, chilly, hardly looked the Sofronie. "Will you buy my hair?" asked Della. "I buy hair," said Madame. "Take your hat off and let's have a sight at the looks of it." Down rippled the brown cascade. $20, said Madame, lifting the mass with a practised hand. "Give it to me quick," said Della. Oh, and the next 2 hours tripped by on rosy wings. Forget the hashed metaphor. She was ransacking the stores for Jim's present. She found it at last. It surely had been made for Jim and no one else. There was no other like it in any of the stores, and she had turned all of them inside out. It was a platinum fob chain, simple and chaste in design, properly proclaiming its value by substance alone, and not by meretricious ornamentation, as all good things should do. It was even worthy of the watch. As soon as she saw it, she knew that it must be Jim's. It was like him, quietness and value. The description applied to both. $21 they took from her for it, and she hurried home with the 87 cents. With that chain on his watch, Jim might be properly anxious about the time in any company. Grand as the watch was, he sometimes looked at it on the sly on account of the old leather strap that he used in place of a chain. When Della reached home, her intoxication gave way a little to prudence and reason. She got out her curling irons and lighted the gas and went to work repairing the ravages made by generosity added to love, which is always a tremendous task, dear friends, a mammoth task. Within 40 minutes, her head was covered with tiny, close-lying curls that made her look wonderfully like a truant schoolboy. She looked at her reflection in the mirror long, carefully, and critically. If Jim doesn't kill me, she said to herself, before he takes a second look at me, he'll say I look like a Coney Island chorus girl. But what could I do? Oh, what could I do with $1.87? At 7 o'clock, the coffee was made and the frying pan was on the back of the stove, hot and ready to cook the chops. Jim was never late. Della doubled the fob chain in her hand and sat on the corner of the table near the door that he always entered. Then she heard his step on the stair, away down on the first flight, and she turned white for just a moment. She had a habit of saying a little silent prayer about the simplest everyday things, and now she whispered, "Please, God, make him think I am still pretty." The door opened and Jim stepped in and closed it. He looked thin and very serious. Poor fellow, he was only 22 and to be burdened with a family. He needed a new overcoat and he was without gloves. Jim stopped inside the door, as immovable as a setter at the scent of quail. His eyes were fixed upon Della, and there was an expression in them that she could not read, and it terrified her. It was not anger, nor surprise, nor disapproval, nor horror, nor any of the sentiments that she had been prepared for. He simply stared at her fixedly with that peculiar expression on his face. Della wriggled off the table and went for him. "Jim, darling," she cried, "don't look at me that way. I had my hair cut off and sold because I couldn't have lived through Christmas without giving you a present. It'll grow out again. You won't mind, will you? I just had to do it. My hair grows awfully fast. Say Merry Christmas, Jim, and let's be happy. You don't know what a beautiful, nice gift I've got for you. You've cut off your hair?" asked Jim, laboriously, as if he had not arrived at that patent fact yet, even after the hardest mental labor. "Cut it off and sold it," said Della. "Don't you like me just as well anyhow? I'm me without my hair, ain't I?" Jim looked about the room curiously. "You say your hair is gone?" he said with an air almost of idiocy. "You needn't look for it," said Della. "It's sold, I tell you, sold and gone, too. It's Christmas Eve, boy. Be good to me, for it went for you. Maybe the hairs of my head were numbered," she went on with sudden, serious sweetness, "but nobody could ever count my love for you. Shall I put the chops on, Jim?" Out of his trance, Jim seemed quickly to wake. He enfolded his Della. For 10 seconds, let us regard with discreet scrutiny some inconsequential object in the other direction. $8 a week or $1,000,000 a year. What is the difference? A mathematician or a wit would give you the wrong answer. The Magi brought valuable gifts, but that was not among them. This dark assertion will be illuminated later on. Jim drew a package from his overcoat pocket and threw it upon the table. "Don't make any mistake, Dell," he said, "about me. I don't think there's anything in the way of a haircut or a shave or a shampoo that could make me like my girl any less. But if you'll unwrap that package, you may see why you had me going a while at first." White fingers and nimble tore at the string and paper, and then an ecstatic scream of joy, and then, alas, a quick feminine change to hysterical tears and wails, necessitating the immediate employment of all the comforting powers of the lord of the flat. For there lay the combs, the set of combs side and back that Della had worshipped long in a Broadway window. Beautiful combs, pure tortoise shell with jeweled rims, just the shade to wear in the beautiful vanished hair. They were expensive combs, she knew, and her heart had simply craved and yearned over them without the least hope of possession. And now they were hers, but the tresses that should have adorned the coveted adornments were gone. But she hugged them to her bosom, and at length she was able to look up with dim eyes and a smile and say, "My hair grows so fast, Jim." And then Della leaped up like a singed cat and cried, "Oh, oh!" Jim had not yet seen his beautiful present. She held it out to him eagerly upon her open palm. The dull, precious metal seemed to flash with a reflection of her bright and ardent spirit. "Isn't it a dandy, Jim? I hunted all over town to find it. You'll have to look at the time 100 times a day now. Give me your watch. I want to see how it looks on it." Instead of obeying, Jim tumbled down on the couch and put his hands under the back of his head and smiled. "Dell," said he, "let's put our Christmas presents away and keep 'em a while. They're too nice to use just at present. I sold the watch to get the money to buy your combs. And now suppose you put the chops on." The Magi, as you know, were wise men, wonderfully wise men, who brought gifts to the babe in the manger. They invented the art of giving Christmas presents. Being wise, their gifts were no doubt wise ones, possibly bearing the privilege of exchange in case of duplication. And here I have lamely related to you the uneventful chronicle of 2 foolish children in a flat who most unwisely sacrificed for each other the greatest treasures of their house. But in a last word to the wise of these days, let it be said that of all who give gifts, these 2 were the wisest. Of all who give and receive gifts, such as they are wisest. Everywhere they are wisest. They are the Magi. End of The Gift of the Magi by O. Henry. The Little Grey Lamb by Archibald Beresford Sullivan. Read in English by Carol Stripling. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Out on the endless purple hills, deep in the clasp of somber night, the shepherds guarded their weary ones, guarded their flocks of cloudy white, that like a snowdrift in silence lay, save one little lamb with its fleece of gray. Out on the hillside, all alone, gazing afar with sleepless eyes, the little gray lamb prayed soft and low, its weary face to the starry skies. O moon of the heavens, so fair, so bright, give me, oh, give me a fleece of white. No answer came from the dome of blue, nor comfort lurked in the cypress trees, but faint came a whisper borne along on the scented wings of the passing breeze. Little gray lamb that prays this night, I cannot give thee a fleece of white. Then the little gray lamb of the sleepless eyes prayed to the clouds for a coat of snow, asked of the roses, besought the woods, but each gave answer sad and low. Little gray lamb that prays this night, we cannot give thee a fleece of white. Like a gem unlocked from a casket dark, like an ocean pearl from its bed of blue, came softly stealing the clouds between a wonderful star which brighter grew until it flamed like the sun by day over the place where Jesus lay. Ere hushed were the angels' notes of praise, the joyful shepherds had quickly sped past rock and shadow, adown the hill to kneel at the Saviour's lowly bed, while, like the spirits of phantom night, followed their flocks of white. And patiently, longingly out of the night, apart from the others, far apart, came limping and sorrowful, all alone, the little grey lamb of the weary heart, murmuring, "I must bide far away, I am not worthy, my fleece is grey." And the Christ-child looked upon humbled pride at kings bent low on the earthen floor, but gazed beyond at the saddened heart of the little grey lamb at the open door. And he called it up to his manger low, and laid his hand on its wrinkled face, while the kings drew golden robes aside to give to the weary one a place. And the fleece of the little grey lamb was blessed, for lo, it was whiter than all the rest. In many cathedrals grand and dim, whose windows glimmer with pane and lens, mid the odour of incense raised in prayer, hallowed about with last amens, the infant Saviour is pictured fair with kneeling Magi, wise and old, but his baby hand rests not on the gifts, the myrrh, the frankincense, the gold, but on the head with a heavenly light of the little grey lamb that was changed to white. End of The Little Grey Lamb by Archibald Beresford Sullivan.
The Mouse and the Christmas Cake by an anonymous author, read in English. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Mouse and the Christmas Cake. A pretty story I will tell of Nib, a little mouse, who took delight, when none were near, to skip about the house. Her little nose could sniff and smell where all good things were kept, and in the pantry well she knew that Mistress Pussy slept. But, notwithstanding, in she crept, and on the shelf she found a Christmas cake, the top of which was by a castle crowned. The subject of the present cake was Windsor's mighty walls, with turrets, windows, standard too, and entrance to the halls. Why, here within such walls as these, thought Mousie, I could dwell, and should the cat lay siege to them, defend myself right well. So with her little teeth, which served for pickaxe and for spade, she gnawed right through the Gothic door, and thus an entrance made. Then climbed a turret, which she chose her residence to make, and thought to leave it now and then, and feast upon the cake. All this occurred on Christmas Eve, and next came Christmas Day. And then some little folks arrived, to eat and drink and play. Right merry are the little folks, and what a noise they make, when Windsor Castle they behold, displayed upon the cake. The turrets and the walls they view, the cannon too admire, the soldiers ready to present, and then pop, pop, to fire. On this, when they had long enough all exercised their wit, they scrutinized the cake and wished to taste a bit of it. Each guest prepared, the knife was raised, some slices to begin, when, lo, with wonder all exclaimed, I hear a noise within. Poor Mousie, when she saw the knife, at once expressed her fear by squeaking out with all her might, which every one could hear. Then John, as he the turret viewed, with consternation cried, "There's something, I am sure, alive, and moving too, inside." All now were hushed, and knew not what all this could be about, while Mouse, in fright, forgot her tail, which at the top popped out. "Why, here's some trick," the lady cried. "I'll knock the turret down." Mousie in terror gave a leap, and ran along her gown. "Oh!" screamed the lady, "what is this?" On each side was dismay, which Mousie took advantage of by scampering away. Their fright all o'er, loud laughs ensued from all within the house. To think that so much fear should be caused by a little mouse. The children hunted for this mouse, but she was not a dolt to wait till she was caught, but made right through a hole a bolt. The party then began their dance, and singing next ensued, and then came supper with its cakes, and very best home brewed. End of The Mouse and the Christmas Cake, by an anonymous author. Read by Ernst Pattynama, Amsterdam, the Netherlands.
The Mouse and the Christmas Cake, by Anonymous, read in English. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. A little mouse that built itself a house in a Christmas cake. A pretty story I will tell of Nib, a little mouse who took delight when none were near to skip about the house. Her little nose could sniff and smell where all good things were kept, and in the pantry well she knew that Mistress Pussy slept. But notwithstanding, in she crept, and on the shelf she found a Christmas cake, the top of which was by a castle crowned. The subject of the present cake was Windsor's mighty walls, with turrets, windows, standard too, and entrance to the halls. "Why, here within such walls as these," thought Mousie, "I could dwell, and should the cat lay siege to them, defend myself right well." So, with her little teeth, which served for pickaxe and for spade, she gnawed right through the Gothic door, and thus an entrance made. Then climbed the turret, which she chose her residence to make, and thought to leave it now and then, and feast upon the cake. All this occurred on Christmas Eve, and next came Christmas Day, and then some little folks arrived, to eat and drink and play. Right merry are the little folks, and what a noise they make when Windsor Castle they behold displayed upon the cake! The turrets and the walls they view, the cannon too admire, the soldiers ready to present, and then pop, pop, to fire. On this, when they had long enough all exercised their wit, they scrutinized the cake, and wished to taste a bit of it. Each guest prepared, the knife was raised some slices to begin, when lo! with wonder, all exclaimed, "I hear a noise within." Poor Mousie, when she saw the knife, at once expressed her fear by squeaking out with all her might, which everyone could hear. Then John, as he the turret viewed, with consternation cried, "There's something, I am sure, alive and moving too inside." All now were hushed, and knew not what all this could be about, while Mouse, in fright, forgot her tail, which at the top popped out. "Why, here's some trick!" the lady cried. "I'll knock the turret down." Mousie, in terror, gave a leap and ran along her gown. "Oh!" screamed the lady, "what is this?" On each side was dismay, which Mousie took advantage of by scampering away. Their fright all o'er, loud laughs ensued from all within the house, to think that so much fear should be caused by a little mouse. The children hunted for this mouse, But she was not a doll to wait till she was caught, but made right through a hole, a bolt. The party then began their dance, and singing next ensued, and then came supper, with its cakes and very best home brewed. End of The Mouse and the Christmas Cake by Anonymous, read by Ezwa in Belgium in December 2008.
The Three Christmas Masses by Alphonse Daudet, translated by Harrison S. Morris, and read in English by Andy Minter. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For further information or to volunteer, please go to LibriVox.org. 1. 2 truffled turkeys, Garrigou? Yes, Reverend Father, 2 magnificent turkeys stuffed with truffles. There's no mistake, for I helped to stuff them myself. The flesh almost cracked as they roasted, it was so tight, so... Holy Virgin! And I, who love truffles, as... Hurry, give me my surplice, Garrigou. And what else besides the turkeys? What else did you see in the kitchen? Oh, all sorts of good things. Since noon we've done nothing but pluck pheasants, peewits, wood-hens, and heathcocks. Feathers are scattered thick. Then from the pond they brought eels, and a golden carp, and trout, and... What size are the trout, Garrigou? Oh, as big as that, Reverend Father. Enormous. Heavens, I seem to see them. Have you put the wine in the flasks? Yes, Reverend Father, I've put the wine in the flasks. But what's a mouthful or two as you go to midnight mass? You should see the dining hall in the chateau, full of decanters that sparkle with wine of every colour, and the silver dishes, above all the ornamented ones, the flowers and the candlesticks. I never saw anything to equal it. Monsieur the Marquis has invited all the nobility of the neighbourhood. You will be at least 40 at table, without counting either the bailiff or the notary. Ah, it will make you very happy to be there, Reverend Father. Why, only to smell the delicious turkeys, the odour of truffles pursues me even yet. Come, come, Garrigou, you must guard against the sin of greediness, and especially on the night of the Nativity. Quickly now, light the candles and sound the first bell for mass. Midnight is very near, and we must not be late. This conversation was held on Christmas night, in the year of grace 1616, between the Reverend Dom Balaquet, formerly prior of Barnabites, now chaplain in the service of the Sires de Trinquelague, and his clerk Garrigou, or at least what he supposed was his clerk Garrigou, because you will learn that the devil had that night taken on the round face and wavering traits of the young sacristan, the better to tempt the Reverend Father to commit the dreadful sin of gluttony. Now, while the supposed Garrigou rung with all his might the bells of the seigneurial chapel, the Reverend Father put on his chasuble in the little sacristy of the chateau, and his mind already becoming troubled by the gastronomic descriptions he had heard, he repeated to himself, "Roasted turkeys, golden carp, trout as large as that." Outside, the night wind blew, scattering the music of the bells, and one by one lights began to appear in the shadows about the flanks of Mont Ventoux, upon the summit of which rose the ancient towers of Trinquelague. These lights were carried by the farmers on their way to attend midnight mass at the chateau. They climbed the paths in groups of 5 or 6, the father leading, lantern in hand, the women enveloped in their big brown mantles, where their infants nestled for shelter. In spite of the hour and the cold, all these honest people marched cheerfully on, sustained by the thought that, when they came out from the mass, they would find, as they did each year, tables spread for them below in the kitchens. Now and again, on the rough ascent, the coach of some seigneur, preceded by torch-bearing porters, reflected in its glasses the cold moonlight. Or maybe a mule trotted along shaking his bells, and in the light of the lanterns covered with frost, the farmers recognised their bailiff, and saluted him as he passed. Good evening, Master Anadon. Good evening, my children." The night was clear, the stars were polished with cold, the wind stung, and a fine sleet, which glistened on the clothes without wetting them, kept faithfully the tradition of Christmases white with snow. Raised there aloft, the chateau appeared like the goal of all things, with its enormous mass of towers and gables, the belfry of its chapel mounting into the blue-black sky, and a crowd of small lights that winked, went and came, twinkled at all the windows, and seemed, on the sombre background of the building, like sparks running through the cinders of burnt paper. Once past the drawbridge and the postern, it was necessary, in order to gain the chapel, to traverse the first courtyard, full of coaches, of valets, of sedan chairs, and bright with the flare of torches and the fires of the kitchens. There was the click of the turnspits, the crash of stewpans, the noises of glass and silver preparing for the dinner. From below, a warm vapour, which smelt of roasting meat and the strong herbs of curious sauces, whispered to the farmers, to the chaplain, to the bailiff, to all the world, "What a revel we are going to have after Mass!" 2. Drillin' din, drillin' din. Midnight Mass is about to begin. In the chapel of the chateau, a miniature cathedral with arches intercrossed, and a wainscot of oak mounting as high as the walls, all the hangings have been arranged, all the candles lit. And what a host of people, and what toilettes! First, seated in the sculptured stall which surrounds the choir, behold the Sieur de Trinquelague in a suit of salmon-coloured taffeta, and next to him all the invited nobles. Facing these, on a prie-dieu trimmed with velvet, is the old dowager marquise in her robe of fire-coloured brocade, and the young Dame de Trinquelague, surmounted by a huge headdress of lace made in the latest fashion of the French court. Further down, dressed in black with vast pointed perukes and shaven faces, are the bailiff, Thomas Arneton, and the notary, Master Ambroy, two grave objects among the flowing silks and figured damasks. Then come the fat major domos, the pages, the grooms, the attendants, Dame Barbe, all her keys suspended at her side on a ring of thin silver. At the bottom of the hall, on the benches, are the servants, the yeomen with their families, and lastly, beyond, all about the doors as they open and shut discreetly, are the scullions, who steal in between two sauces to get a little of the mass, carrying an odour of the revelry into the church, all in its gay attire and warm with so many burning candles. Is it a glimpse of their little white caps that distracts the celebrant of the mass? Or it may be the clangour made by Garrigou's bells, that pulsating sound which shakes the altar with an infernal vibration, and seems to say all the time, "Hurry up, we'll soon be done, we'll soon be at table." The fact is, that each time it sounds, that peal of the devil, the chaplain forgets his mass, and thinks of nothing but the coming revel. He pictures to himself the uproar of the kitchens, the furnace heated like a blacksmith's forge, the vapour of opening trenchers, and in that vapour two magnificent turkeys, buttered, tender, bursting with truffles. Or perhaps he saw pass the files of little pages, bearing dishes enveloped in tempting steam, and with them entered the grand saloon already prepared for the feast. Oh, deliciousness! Behold the immense table all set and sparkling, the peacocks in their plumes, the pheasants with their open wings of reddish brown, the ruby-coloured flagons, the pyramids of fruit peeping from green branches, and those marvellous fish of which Garrigou told. Ah, well, yes, Garrigou. Held aloft on a bed of fennel, the mother-of-pearl scales bright as when they came from the water, with a bouquet of odorous herbs in their monster-like nostrils. So distinct is the vision of these marvels, that it seems to Dom Balaguer as if all the wonderful dishes are served before him on the embroideries of the altar-cloth, and 2 or 3 times, in place of Dominus Vobiscum, he is surprised to find himself repeating the Benedicite. Saving these slight mistakes, the holy man does his office very conscientiously, without skipping a line, without omitting a genuflection, and all goes well enough as far as the end of the first Mass, because, you know, on Christmas night the same celebrant must repeat 3 consecutive Masses. "1," said the chaplain, with a sigh of relief. Then, without losing a minute, he made a sign to his clerk, the person he believed to be his clerk, and Drillin-din, drillin-din. The second mass begins, and with it begins also the sin of Dom Balaguer. "Hurry, hurry, let's get done," cries the thin bell of Garrigou's bell, and this time the unlucky priest, abandoning himself to the demon of gluttony, rushes through the missal, devouring its pages with all the avidity of an overcharged appetite. Frantically he bows, arises, makes the signs of the cross, goes through the genuflections, abbreviates all his gestures, the sooner to be finished. Scarcely does he extend his arms to the gospel, or strike his breast where it is required. Between the clerk and him it is a race who shall jabber the faster. Verse and response hurry each other, tumble over each other, the words, hardly pronounced because it takes too much time to open the mouth, become incomprehensible murmurs. Oremus, mea culpa. Like hard-working vintagers pressing grapes in a vat, both wade through the Latin of the Mass, splashing it on all sides. "Dom scum," says Balaguer. "Statuo," responds Garrigou, and all the while the damnable chime sounds in their ears like those little bells put on the post-horses to make them gallop more swiftly. Believe me, under such conditions a low mass is vastly expedited. "Two," said the chaplain, all out of breath. Then, without taking time to breathe, red, perspiring, he tumbled down the stairs of the altar. Drelindin, drelindin, the third mass begins. Only a step or so, and then the dining hall. But alas, the nearer the revel approaches, the more the unfortunate Balaguer is seized with the very folly of impatience and greediness. His vision accentuates it. The golden carp, the roast turkeys are there. He may touch them. He may... Oh, Holy Virgin! The dishes steam, the wines send forth sweet odours, and shaking out its reckless song, the bell cries to him, "Hurry up! Hurry up! Still faster! Still faster!" But how can he go any faster? He scarcely moves his lips. He pronounces fully not a single word. He tries to cheat the good God altogether of his mass, and that is what brings his ruin. By temptation upon temptation he begins to jump one verse, then two. Then the epistle is too long. He does not finish it. Skims the gospel. Passes by the creed without even entering. Skips the pater. Salutes from afar the preface. And by bounds and jumps precipitates him into eternal damnation, always following the infamous Garrigou. Vade retro Satanas, who seconds him with marvellous skill, tucks up his chasuble, turns the leaves 2 by 2, disarranges the music desk, reverses the flagons, and unceasingly rings the bell more and more vigorously, more and more quickly. You should have seen what a figure all the assistants cut. Obliged to follow, like mimics, a mass of which they did not understand a word, some rose when others kneeled, or seated themselves when others stood, and all the actors in this singular office mixed themselves on the benches in numberless contrary attitudes. The star of Christmas on its journey through the heavens, yonder by the little manger, paled with astonishment at the confusion. "The Abbé's in a dreadful hurry. I can't follow him at all," said the aged dowager, shaking her head-dress with bewilderment. Master Arneton, his great steel spectacles on his nose, searched in his prayer-book where the deuce the words could be. But after all, that gallant host, which itself was thinking only of the feast, was far from being vexed because the mass rode post. And when Balaguer, with beaming countenance, turned towards the assembly, crying with all his might, "Ite mita est," with single voice they returned, "Deo gratias," so joyously, so fervently, that one might have thought them already at table, responding to the first toast of the night. 3. 5 minutes later, the crowd of seigneurs was seated in the grand dining hall, the chaplain in the midst of them. The chateau, illuminated from top to bottom, echoed with songs, cries, laughter, uproar, and the venerable Dom Balaguer planted his fork in the wing of a wood-hen, drowning the remorse of his sin under floods of wine of the Pope and the sweet juices of the meat. So much did he eat and drink, that the poor holy man died in the night of a terrible attack of sickness, without having even time to repent. Then, near morning, he arrived in heaven, with all the savour of the feast still about him. And I leave you to imagine how he was received. "Retire from my sight, evil Christian," said the sovereign judge. "Thy fault is dark enough to efface a whole life of virtue. Ah, thou hast robbed me of a mass to-night. Thou shalt pay me back 300 in its place, and thou shalt not enter into paradise unless thou shalt have celebrated in thy proper chapel these 300 Christmas masses in the presence of all those who have sinned by thy fault and with thee." This, then, is the true legend of Dom Balaguer, as they tell it in the land of olives. To-day the chateau of Trinquelague is no more, but the chapel still stands erect on the summit of Mont Ventoux, in a grove of green oaks. The wind beats its disjointed portal, the grass creeps across its threshold, the birds have built in the angles of the altar, and in the embrasures of the high windows, whence the coloured panes have long ago vanished. But it appears that every year at Christmas a supernatural light runs about these ruins, and that, in going to mass or feast, the peasants see the chapel illuminated by invisible candles, which burn brightly even through the wind and snow. You may laugh if you will, but a vine-dresser of the neighbourhood, named Garrigue, without doubt a descendant of Garrigou, has assured me that one Christmas night, finding himself a little so-so-ish, he became lost on the mountain beside Trinquelague, and behold what he saw. At 11 o'clock, nothing. All was silent, dark, lifeless. Suddenly, towards midnight, a chime sounded up above from a clock, an old, old chime, which seemed 6 leagues away. Pretty soon, on the ascending road, Garrigue saw lights trembling in the uncertain shadows. Under the porch of the chapel somebody walked. Somebody whispered, "Good evening, Master Oniton." Good evening, my children." When the whole company was entered, my vine-dresser, who was exceedingly brave, approached stealthily, and peeping through the broken door, saw a strange spectacle. All those who had passed him were ranged about the choir in the ruined nave, as if the ancient benches still existed. Beautiful dames in brocade with coifs of lace, seigneurs bedizened from top to toe, peasants in flowered jackets like those of our grandfathers, everything with an ancient air, faded, dusty, worn out. Now and then the night birds, habitual dwellers in the chapel, awakened by all these lights, winged about the candles, whose flames mounted straight and vague, as if they burnt behind gauze. And what amused Garrigue most was a certain personage with great steel spectacles, who shook at each instant his high black peruke, on which one of the birds had alighted and entangled itself, silently beating its wings. At the farthest end, a little old man of boyish size, on his knees in the midst of the choir, pulled desperately at the chimeless and silent bell, while a priest, attired in ancient gold, went and came before the altar, reciting orisons, of which one heard not a single word. Surely that was Dom Balaguer in the act of saying his 3rd low mass. End of The 3 Christmas Masses by Alphonse Daudet, translated by Harrison S. Morris, and read by Andy Minter.
'Twas the Night Before Christmas by Clement Clarke Moore, read in English by Mjbrichant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. 'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads, and Mamma in her kerchief and I in my cap had just settled our brains for a long winter's nap. When out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from the bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new-fallen snow gave the lustre of midday to objects below, when what to my wondering eyes should appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer. With the little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be St. Nick. More rapid than eagles his coursers they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donner, on Blitzen, to the top of the porch, to the top of the wall, now dash away all. As dry leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle mount to the sky, so up to the housetop the coursers they flew, with the sleigh full of toys and St. Nicholas too. And then in a twinkling I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. As I drew in my head and I was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. His eyes how they twinkled, his dimples how merry, his cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard of his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a little round belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him, in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk. And laying his finger aside of his nose, and giving a nod up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim, ere he drove out of sight, Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night. End of 'Twas the Night Before Christmas by Clement Clarke Moore. This recording is in the public domain.
Under the Holly-Bough by Charles Mackay. Read in English. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Ye who have scorned each other, or injured friend or brother, in this fast-fading year, ye who by word or deed have made a kind heart bleed, come gather here. Let sinned against and sinning forget their strife's beginning, and join in friendship now. Be links no longer broken, be sweet forgiveness spoken, under the holly-bough. Ye who have loved each other, sister and friend and brother, in this fast-fading year, mother and sire and child, young man and maiden mild, come gather here. And let your heart grow fonder, as memory shall ponder each past unbroken vow. Old loves and younger wooing are sweet in the renewing, under the holly-bough. Ye who have nourished sadness, estranged from hope and gladness in this fast-fading year, ye with o'erburdened mind, made aliens from your kind, come gather here. Let not the useless sorrow pursue you night and morrow. If e'er you hoped, hope now. Take heart, uncloud your faces, and join in our embraces, under the holly-bough. End of Under the Holly-Bough by Charles Mackay. Read by Jan MacGillivray. Extract from The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame, read in English. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. "What a fellow you are for giving in," said the rat reproachfully. "Why, only just now I saw a sardine opener on the kitchen dresser quite distinctly, and everybody knows that means there are sardines about somewhere in the neighbourhood. Rouse yourself, pull yourself together and come with me and forage." They went and foraged accordingly, hunting through every cupboard and turning out every drawer. The result was not so very depressing after all, though of course it might have been better. A tin of sardines, a box of captain's biscuits, nearly full, and a German sausage encased in silver paper. "There's a banquet for you," observed the rat as he arranged the table. "I know some animals who would give their ears to be sitting down to supper with us to-night." "No bread," groaned the mole dolorously. "No butter, no pâté de foie gras, no champagne," continued the rat, grinning. "And that reminds me, what's that little door at the end of the passage? Your cellar, of course. Every luxury in this house. Just you wait a minute." He made for the cellar door, and presently reappeared somewhat dusty, with a bottle of beer in each paw, and another under each arm. "Self-indulgent beggar you seem to be, Mole," he observed. "Deny yourself nothing. This is really the jolliest little place I ever was in. Now, wherever did you pick up those prints? Make the place look so home-like, they do. No wonder you're so fond of it, Mole. Tell us all about it, and how you came to make it what it is." Then, while the rat busied himself fetching plates, and knives and forks, and mustard which he mixed in an egg-cup, the mole, his bosom still heaving with the stress of his recent emotion, related, somewhat shyly at first, but with more freedom as he warmed to his subject, how this was planned, and how that was thought out, and how this was got through a windfall from an aunt, and that was a wonderful find and a bargain, and this other thing was bought out of laborious savings and a certain amount of going without. His spirits finally quite restored, he must needs go and caress his possessions, and take a lamp, and show off their points to his visitor, and expatiate on them, quite forgetful of the supper they both so much needed. Rat, who was desperately hungry, but strove to conceal it, nodding seriously, examining with a puckered brow, and saying "Wonderful" and "Most remarkable" at intervals when the chance for an observation was given him. At last the rat succeeded in decoying him to the table, and had just got seriously to work with the sardine opener, when sounds were heard from the forecourt without. Sounds like the scuffling of small feet in the gravel, and a confused murmur of tiny voices, while broken sentences reached them. "Now, all in a line. Hold the lantern up a bit, Tommy. Clear your throats first. No coughing after I say 1, 2, 3. Where's young Bill? Here, come on, do. We're all a-waiting." "What's up?" inquired the rat, pausing in his labours. "I think it must be the field mice," replied the mole, with a touch of pride in his manner. "They go round carol singing regularly at this time of the year. They're quite an institution in these parts, and they never pass me over. They come to Mole End last of all, and I used to give them hot drinks and supper too sometimes, when I could afford it. It would be like old times to hear them again." "Let's have a look at them," cried the rat, jumping up and running to the door. It was a pretty sight, and a seasonable one, that met their eyes when they flung the door open. In the forecourt, lit by the dim rays of a horn lantern, some 8 or 10 little field mice stood in a semicircle, red worsted comforters round their throats, their forepaws thrust deep into their pockets, their feet jigging for warmth. With bright beady eyes they glanced shyly at each other, sniggering a little, sniffing and applying coat sleeves a good deal. As the door opened, one of the elder ones that carried the lantern was just saying, "Now then, 1, 2, 3, and forthwith their shrill little voices uprose on the air, singing one of the old-time carols that their forefathers composed in fields that were fallow and held by frost, or when snow-bound in chimney-corners, and handed down to be sung in the miry street to lamp-lit windows at Yule-time. Carol. Villagers all this frosty tide Let your doors swing open wide, though wind may follow and snow beside, yet draw us in by your fire to bide. Joy shall be yours in the morning. Here we stand in the cold and the sleet, blowing fingers and stamping feet, come from far away you to greet, you by the fire and we in the street, bidding you joy in the morning. For ere one half of the night was gone, sudden a star has led us on, raining bliss and benison, bliss to-morrow and more anon, joy for every morning. Goodman Joseph toiled through the snow, saw the star o'er a stable low. Mary, she might not further go, welcome thatch and litter below, joy was hers in the morning. And then they heard the angels tell, who were the first to cry Noel. Animals all, as it befell, in the stable where they did dwell, joy shall be theirs in the morning. The voices ceased, the singers, bashful but smiling, exchanged sidelong glances, and silence succeeded, but for a moment only. Then, from up above and far away, down the tunnel they had so lately travelled, was borne to their ears in a faint musical hum the sound of distant bells, ringing a joyful and clangorous peal. "Very well sung, boys," cried the rat heartily. "And now come along in, all of you, and warm yourselves by the fire, and have something hot." "Yes, come along, field mice," cried the mole eagerly. "This is quite like old times. Shut the door after you. Pull up that settle to the fire. Now, you just wait a minute while we... Oh, Ratty!" he cried in despair, plumping down on a seat with tears impending. "Whatever are we doing? We've nothing to give them." "You leave all that to me," said the masterful rat. "Here, you with the lantern, come over this way, I want to talk to you. Now tell me, are there any shops open at this hour of the night?" "Why, certainly, sir," replied the field mouse respectfully. "At this time of the year our shops keep open to all sorts of hours." "Then look here," said the rat. "You go off at once, you and your lantern, and you get me..." Here much muttered conversation ensued, and the mole only heard bits of it, such as "Fresh mind? No, a pound of that will do." "See you get Buggins, for I won't have any other. No, only the best." "If you can't get it there, try somewhere else." "Yes, of course, homemade, no tin stuff." "Well then, do the best you can." Finally there was a chink of coin passing from paw to paw. The field mouse was provided with an ample basket for his purchases, and off he hurried, he and his lantern. The rest of the field mice, perched in a row on the settle, their small legs swinging, gave themselves up to enjoyment of the fire, and toasted their chilblains till they tingled, while the mole, failing to draw them into easy conversation, plunged into family history, and made each of them recite the names of his numerous brothers, who were too young, it appeared, to be allowed to go out carolling this year, but looked forward very shortly to winning the parental consent. The rat, meanwhile, was busy examining the label on one of the beer bottles. "I perceive this to be old Burton," he remarked approvingly. "Sensible mole, the very thing. Now we shall be able to mull some ale. Get the things ready, mole, while I draw the corks." It did not take long to prepare the brew, and thrust the tin heater well into the red heart of the fire, and soon every field mouse was sipping and coughing and choking, for a little mulled ale goes a long way, and wiping his eyes and laughing and forgetting he had ever been cold in all his life. "They act plays too, these fellows," the mole explained to the rat. "Make them up all by themselves, and act them afterwards, and very well they do it too. They gave us a capital one last year about a field mouse who was captured at sea by a Barbary corsair and made to row in a galley, and when he escaped and got home again, his lady love had gone into a convent. Here, you were in it, I remember. Get up and recite a bit." The field mouse addressed got up on his legs, giggled shyly, looked round the room, and remained absolutely tongue-tied. His comrades cheered him on. Mole coaxed and encouraged him, and the rat went so far as to take him by the shoulders and shake him. But nothing could overcome his stage fright. They were all busily engaged on him like watermen applying the Royal Humane Society's regulations to a case of long submersion, when the latch clicked, the door opened, and the field mouse with the lantern reappeared, staggering under the weight of his basket. There was no more talk of play-acting, once the very real and solid contents of the basket had been tumbled out on the table. Under the generalship of Rat, everybody was set to do something, or to fetch something. In a very few minutes supper was ready, and Mole, as he took the head of the table in a sort of a dream, saw a lately barren board set thick with savoury comforts, saw his little friends' faces brighten and beam as they fell to without delay, and then let himself loose, for he was famished indeed, on the provender so magically provided, thinking what a happy homecoming this had turned out after all. As they ate, they talked of old times, and the field mice gave him the local gossip up to date, and answered as well as they could the 100 questions he had to ask them. The rat said little or nothing, only taking care that each guest had what he wanted, and plenty of it, and that Mole had no trouble or anxiety about anything. They clattered off at last, very grateful, and showering wishes of the season, with their jacket pockets stuffed with remembrances for the small brothers and sisters at home. When the door had closed on the last of them, and the chink of the lanterns had died away, Mole and Rat kicked the fire up, drew their chairs in, brewed themselves a last nightcap of mulled ale, and discussed the events of the long day. At last the Rat, with a tremendous yawn, said, "Mole, old chap, I'm ready to drop. Sleepy is simply not the word. That's your own bunk over on that side. Very well, then, I'll take this. What a ripping little house this is, everything so handy." He clambered into his bunk and rolled himself well up in the blankets, and slumber gathered him forthwith as a swathe of barley is folded into the arms of the reaping machine. The weary Mole was also glad to turn in without delay, and soon had his head on his pillow in great joy and contentment. But ere he closed his eyes, he let them wander round his old room, mellow in the glow of the firelight that played or rested on familiar and friendly things which had long been unconsciously a part of him, and now smilingly received him back without rancour. He was now in just the frame of mind that the tactful Rat had quietly worked to bring about in him. He saw clearly how plain and simple, how narrow even it all was, but clearly too how much it all meant to him, and the special value of some such anchorage in one's existence. He did not at all want to abandon the new life and its splendid spaces, to turn his back on sun and air and all they offered him, and creep home and stay there. The upper world was all too strong. It called to him still, even down there, and he knew he must return to the larger stage. But it was good to think he had this to come back to, this place which was all his own, these things which were so glad to see him again, and could always be counted upon for the same simple welcome. End of an extract from The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame.
La Paysanne by Paul Arène. Read in French by Didier. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. La Paysanne. Il y avait une fois à Lucency, pas très loin de la Ferté-sous-Jouarre, une vieille femme, si vieille que tous ses parents étaient morts. On l'appelait la Sempiterne, malgré que son vrai nom fût Veuve Gogu. La Sempiterne possédait pour seule fortune une chèvre dont elle rendait le lait dans la saison et que les bonnes gens la laissaient nourrir, comme par aumône, du maigre gazon des bords de champs ainsi qu'aux troènes de leurs haies. De temps en temps aussi, pour gagner quelques pauvres journées, elle s'en allait laver lessive à la fontaine de Cranlin où les fées reviennent. C'est une eau qui sourd au bas des coteaux, par-dessous une pierre moussue, et puis s'étend en claire nappe à l'ombre de 13 tilleuls. Un jour, c'était l'année passée, à peu près vers cette saison, quand l'épine franche a passé fleur et quand sur les buissons commence à blanchir l'aubépine, un jour la Sempiterne eut une surprise. Dans cet endroit solitaire d'où la crainte écartait le monde, à côté de la pierre moussue, une belle dame était assise, la figure si blanche avec de si fins cheveux d'or que la Sempiterne s'arrêta, la prenant au moins pour une fée. Mais un garçonnet jouait près d'elle, et la Sempiterne comprit que ce ne pouvait pas être une fée, parce que les fées n'ont pas d'enfants. Alors, ayant attaché la chèvre au bord de l'eau, les chèvres, comme on sait, sont friandes de cresson et de menthe, et ces herbes leur font le lait bon, elle mit le linge trempé et s'installa un peu plus bas, pourtant qu'à sa place habituelle, pour ne pas déranger la belle dame. Mais tout en lavant sans rien dire, elle levait parfois la tête et regardait sournoisement la belle dame et son garçon. La dame lisait dans un livre, au grand étonnement de la Sempiterne, qui n'avait jamais vu faire cela qu'au curé. Le garçon, voulant lier connaissance avec la chèvre, avait franchi la rue où se déverse la fontaine. Quelquefois, quand il s'approchait trop, la chèvre tirait sur sa corde et le front baissé menaçait. Alors le garçon s'enfuyait, peureux et content d'avoir peur. Courant de la sorte, il tomba. « Henriquet, Henriquet !» s'écria la belle dame. Mais déjà la vieille Sempiterne s'était dressée et elle relevait l'enfant tout en menaçant la chèvre de son battoir. « Ah, la païenne, ah, la sans-cœur, c'est le diable et ses cornes, cette bête. T'as pas honte, dis, t'as pas honte de faire ainsi frayeur au p'tio ?» La chèvre écoutait le discours. Henriquet, émerveillé, et qui n'avait plus peur du tout, osa lui caresser les poils de sa barbiche. Cependant, la belle dame demandait si on ne pourrait pas, le matin, apporter au hameau des Hautes-Feuillées un verre de lait pour Henriquet. « Pas avant un mois, tout au juste. Faut auparavant que la chèvre chevrotte, mais sitôt le biquet sevré, nous garderons le lait pour vous. » À partir de ce moment, Henriquet prit en grande amitié la vieille Sempiterne et sa chèvre. Il venait à leur rencontre tous les jours sur le chemin de la fontaine. Mais ce fut bien autre chose encore lorsque la chèvre eut chevrotté et que son biquet la suivit. Henriquet le prenait dans ses bras. Il tétait au pis comme lui, et la chèvre le laissait faire. si bien qu'après 5 mois, lorsque, octobre annonçant l'hiver, la dame parla de regagner Paris, Henriquet pleura tant et tant qu'il fallut amener aussi la chèvre, le chevreau et la sempiterne. Effrayé par le vacarme des wagons et le fourmillement de cette grande ville où, tous les jours que le soleil fait, le monde est en habit des dimanches, la bonne vieille sempiterne avait d'abord voulu repartir. Il y a trop de maisons et point assez d'arbres. Puis la nuit, lorsqu'elle regardait de sa fenêtre à mansarde les milliers de becs de gaz étincelants comme des étoiles, les gens par ici sont fous, bien sûr, de gaspiller ainsi leur huile. Et elle concluait par sa phrase de prédilection: tout ça, c'est le diable et ses cornes. Formule vague mais commode qui lui servait à exprimer les sensations les plus diverses. Peu à peu, cependant, la sempiterne s'est habituée. Le Luxembourg, les Tuileries, les arbres des quais et des squares l'ont réconciliée avec Paris. Elle a appris le chemin des rues. Et maintenant c'est elle qui, toute seule, conduit Henriquet en promenade, regrettant, à la vue des parterres toujours en fleurs et des pelouses bien arrosées, de ne pouvoir également y conduire la chèvre et le chevreau, prisonniers dans le coin d'un petit jardin. Henriquet l'appelle maman Gogu et n'échangerait pas, pour la nounou la mieux pomponnée avec des rubans de bonnet si longs qu'ils en traînent par terre et des boules d'or dans les cheveux, cette paysanne sèche comme du bois sec, crevassée comme un serment de vigne, dont la peau sent la terre et l'herbe, et qui lui conte de si beaux contes le soir quand vient l'heure de s'endormir. Elle se trouve heureuse, la sempiterne. C'est pour elle, à 70 ans passés, une enfance qui recommence, aussi lumineuse, aussi féerique que la première fut triste et terne. Un jour, on l'a menée à la comédie, et tout de suite elle s'est signée, croyant entrer dans une église. Au jardin d'acclimatation, au jardin des plantes où son Henriquet la promène, elle a de naïves terreurs devant les bêtes des pays étranges et de grandes joies à reconnaître un arbuste, une fleur qu'elle nomme de son nom rustique. Tout cela, sans doute, est pour Henriquet, mais plus qu'Henriquet, elle en profite. Parfois même, on n'est pas parfait, et les vieillards devenus enfants reprennent goût aux friandises. Parfois, quand elle achète quelques gâteaux pour Henriquet, il lui arrive de les corner, légèrement, du bout des doigts, et de se régaler des bribes. Si vous l'aviez vu l'autre après-midi devant la baraque à Polichinelle, la pièce avait un succès énorme. L'héroïque et féroce bossu frétillant, frappant, baragouinant était en train d'assommer le commissaire, et c'étaient des fusées de rire chaque fois qu'un fort coup de trique résonnait sur un crâne en bois. Mais dans l'auditoire enfantin, personne, pas même Henriquet, ne s'amusait, soyez-en sûrs, à l'égal de la bonne vieille, applaudissant de ses mains dures et dans les yeux de qui, des yeux ridés, petits et clairs, les larmes du plaisir brillaient. Mais le printemps est revenu. On retourne à Lucency dans 8 jours. Henriquet en rêve la nuit. Il se voit jambes nues dans les hautes herbes avec la chèvre et le chevreau près de la fontaine de Cranlin où les fées reviennent. La sempiterne est contente aussi, pauvre sempiterne, très contente. Mais son contentement ne va pas sans regret. Votre grand Paris, voyez-vous, c'est quasiment le diable et ses cornes. Pourtant, s'il fallait, tout de même je m'accoutumerais ben à y mourir. End of La Paysanne by Paul Arène.
Les anges dans nos campagnes by unknown author, sung in French. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Les anges dans nos campagnes by unknown author.
Les anges dans nos campagnes ont entonné l'hymne des cieux. quel est l'objet de tous ces chants? Quel vainqueur, quelle conquête mérite ces cris triomphants? Gloria in excelsis Deo. Gloria in excelsis Deo. Ils annoncent la naissance du libérateur d'Israël, et plein de reconnaissance chante ce jour si solennel. Gloria in excelsis Deo. Gloria in excelsis Deo. Cherchons tous l'heureux village qu'il a vu naître sous ses toits. Offrons-lui le tendre hommage, et de nos cœurs et de nos voix. Gloria in excelsis Deo. Gloria in excelsis Deo. Dans l'humilité profonde où vous paraissez à nos yeux, pour vous louer, roi du monde, nous redirons ce chant joyeux. Gloria in excelsis Deo. Gloria in excelsis Deo. Déjà par la voix de l'ange, par les hymnes des chérubins, la terre suit la louange qui se chante au parvis divin. Gloria in excelsis Deo. Gloria in excelsis Deo. Bergers, quittez vos retraites, unissez-vous à leur concert, et que vos tendres musettes fassent retentir dans les airs. Gloria in excelsis Deo. Gloria in excelsis Deo. peuple, chantez avec vos bienfaits. Gloria, in excelsis Deo, Gloria, in excelsis Deo.
End of Les Anges dans nos campagnes by unknown author, sung by Ezwa in Belgium in November 2008. Minuit chrétien by Placide Cappeau de Roquemaure and Adolphe Adam, sung in French. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org.
Minuit chrétien, c'est l'heure solennelle où l'homme Dieu descendit jusqu'à nous. Pour effacer la tâche originelle et de son père arrêter le courroux. Le monde entier tressaille d'espérance à cette nuit qui lui donne un sauveur. Peuple à genoux, attends ta délivrance. Noël, Noël, voici le Rédempteur. Noël, Noël, voici le Rédempteur. De notre foi, que la lumière ardente nous guide tous au berceau de l'enfant. Comme autrefois, une étoile brillante y conduisit les chefs de l'Orient. Le roi des rois naît dans une humble crèche, puissant du jour, fier de votre grandeur. À votre orgueil, c'est de là qu'un Dieu prêche. Courbez vos fronts devant le Rédempteur. Courbez vos fronts devant le Rédempteur. Le Rédempteur a brisé toute entrave, la terre est libre et le ciel est ouvert. Il voit un frère où n'était qu'un esclave, l'amour uni ce qu'enchaînait le fer. Qui lui dira notre reconnaissance, c'est pour nous tous qu'il naît, qu'il souffre et meurt. Peuple debout, chante ta délivrance. Noël, Noël, chantons le Rédempteur. Noël, Noël, chantons le Rédempteur.
End of Minuit chrétien by Placide Cappeau de Roquemaure and Adolphe Adam, sung by Ezwa in Belgium in October 2008.
Das kleine Mädchen mit den Schwefelhölzern by Hans Christian Andersen. Read in German. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Es war fürchterlich kalt. Es schneite und begann, dunkler Abend zu werden. Es war der letzte Abend im Jahre, Neujahrsabend. In dieser Kälte und in dieser Finsternis ging ein kleines, armes Mädchen mit bloßem Kopfe und nackten Füßen auf der Straße. Sie hatte freilich Pantoffeln gehabt, als sie von zu Hause wegging, aber was half das? Es waren sehr große Pantoffeln. Ihre Mutter hatte sie zuletzt getragen, so groß waren sie. Diese verlor die Kleine, als sie sich beeilte, über die Straße zu gelangen, indem 2 Wagen gewaltig schnell heranjagten. Der eine Pantoffel war nicht wiederzufinden, und mit dem anderen lief ein Knabe davon, der sagte, er könne ihn als Wiege benutzen, wenn er selbst einmal Kinder bekomme. Da ging nun das arme Mädchen auf den bloßen kleinen Füßen, die ganz rot und blau vor Kälte waren. In einer alten Schürze hielt sie eine Menge Schwefelhölzer, und einen Bund trug sie in der Hand. Niemand hatte ihr während des ganzen Tages etwas abgekauft. Niemand hatte ihr auch nur einen Dreier geschenkt. Hungrig und halb erfroren schlich sie einher und sah sehr gedrückt aus, die arme Kleine. Die Schneeflocken fielen in ihr langes, gelbes Haar, welches sich schön über den Hals lockte. Aber an Pracht dachte sie freilich nicht. In einem Winkel zwischen 2 Häusern, das eine sprang etwas weiter in die Straße vor als das andere, da setzte sie sich und kauerte sich zusammen. Die kleinen Füße hatte sie fest angezogen, aber es fror sie noch mehr, und sie wagte nicht nach Hause zu gehen, denn sie hatte ja keine Schwefelhölzer verkauft, nicht einen einzigen Dreier erhalten. Ihr Vater würde sie schlagen, und kalt war es daheim auch. Sie hatten nur das Dach gerade über sich, und da pfiff der Wind herein, obgleich Stroh und Lappen zwischen die größten Spalten gestopft waren. Ihre kleinen Hände waren vor Kälte fast ganz erstarrt. Ach, ein Schwefelhölzchen könnte gewiss recht gut tun, wenn sie nur wagen durfte, eins aus dem Bunde herauszuziehen, es gegen die Wand zu streichen und die Finger daran zu wärmen. Sie zog eins heraus. Ritsch! Wie sprühte es, wie brannte es! Es gab eine warme, helle Flamme, wie ein kleines Licht, als sie die Hand darum hielt. Es war ein wunderbares Licht. Es kam dem kleinen Mädchen vor, als sitze sie vor einem großen eisernen Ofen mit Messingfüßen und einem messingenen Aufsatz. Das Feuer brannte ganz herrlich darin und wärmte schön. Die Kleine streckte schon die Füße aus, um auch diese zu wärmen. Da erlosch die Flamme, der Ofen verschwand. Sie saß mit einem kleinen Stumpf des ausgebrannten Schwefelholzes in der Hand. Sie zündete ein neues an. Da saß sie unter dem schönsten Weihnachtsbaume. Der war noch größer und aufgeputzter als der, welchen sie zu Weihnachten durch die Glastüre bei dem reichen Kaufmanne erblickt hatte. Viel tausend Lichter brannten an den grünen Zweigen, und bunte Bilder, wie die, welche die Ladenfenster schmückten, schauten zu ihr herab. Die Kleine streckte die beiden Hände in die Höhe. Da erlosch das Schwefelholz. Die vielen Weihnachtslichter stiegen höher und immer höher. Nun sah sie, dass es die klaren Sterne am Himmel waren. Einer davon fiel herab und machte einen langen Feuerstreifen am Himmel. »Nun stirbt jemand«, sagte die Kleine, denn ihre alte Großmutter, welche die einzige war, die sie lieb gehabt hatte, die jetzt aber tot war, hatte gesagt, »Wenn ein Stern fällt, so steigt eine Seele zu Gott empor.« Sie strich wieder ein Schwefelholz gegen die Mauer. Es leuchtete ringsumher, und im Glanze desselben stand die alte Großmutter, glänzend, mild und lieblich da. »Großmutter«, rief die Kleine, »oh, nimm mich mit! Ich weiß, dass du auch gehst, wenn das Schwefelholz ausgeht, gleich wie der warme Ofen, der schöne Gänsebraten und der große, herrliche Weihnachtsbaum.« Sie strich eiligst den ganzen Rest der Schwefelhölzer, welche noch im Bunde waren. Sie wollte die Großmutter recht festhalten, und die Schwefelhölzer leuchteten mit solchem Glanz, dass es heller war als am lichten Tage. Die Großmutter war nie so schön und so groß gewesen. Sie hob das kleine Mädchen auf ihren Arm, und in Glanz und Freude flogen sie in die Höhe. Und da fühlte sie keine Kälte, keinen Hunger, keine Furcht. Sie waren bei Gott. Aber im Winkel am Hause saß in der kalten Morgenstunde das kleine Mädchen mit roten Wangen, mit lächelndem Munde, tot, erfroren am letzten Abend des alten Jahres. Der Neujahrsmorgen ging über die kleine Leiche auf, welche mit Schwefelhölzern dasaß, wovon ein Bund fast verbrannt war. »Sie hat sich wärmen wollen«, sagte man. Niemand wusste, was sie Schönes erblickt hatte, in welchem Glanze sie mit der alten Großmutter zur Neujahrsfreude eingegangen war. End of Das kleine Mädchen mit den Schwefelhölzern bei Hans Christian Andersen.
Das Weihnachtsbäumlein bei Christian Morgenstern. Read in German by Didier. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Das Weihnachtsbäumlein. Es war einmal ein Tennelein mit braun Kuchenherzlein und Glitzergold und Äpflein fein und vielen bunten Kerzlein. Das war am Weihnachtsfest so grün, als fing es eben an zu blühen. Doch nach nicht gar zu langer Zeit, da stand's im Garten unten und seine ganze Herrlichkeit war, dahingeschwunden. Die grünen Nadeln waren verdorrt, die Herzlein und die Kerzlein fort. Bis eines Tages der Gärtner kam, den froh zu Haus im Dunkeln, und es in seinen Ofen nahm. Hei, tat's da sprühen und funkeln und flammte heim und himmelswärts in 100 Flämmlein an Gottes Herz. End of Das Weihnachtsbäumlein bei Christian Morgenstern.
Die Könige. Dies ist eine LibriVox-Aufnahme. Alle LibriVox-Aufnahmen sind lizenzfrei und in öffentlichem Besitz. Weitere Informationen und Hinweise zur Beteiligung an diesem Projekt gibt es bei LibriVox.org. Aufgenommen von Ruth Golding, Weihnacht 2008. Die Könige von Peter Cornelius.
3 Könige wandern aus Morgenland. Ein Sternlein führt sie zum Jordanstrand. In Jude fragen und forschen die 3, wo der neugeborene König sei. Sie wollen Weihrauch, Myrrhen und Gold dem Kinder spenden zum Opfersold. Und helle glänzet der Sterne Schein, zum Stalle gehen die Könige ein. Das Knäblein schauen sie wohniglich, anbetend neigen die Könige sich. Sie bringen Weihrauch, Myrrhen und Gold zum Opfer dar, dem Knäblein hold. O Menschenkind, halte treulich Schritt. Die Könige wandern, o wandre mit. Der Stern der Liebe, der Gnade Stern, erhelle dein Ziel, so du suchst dein Herrn, und fehlen Weihrauch, Myrrhen und Gold, schenke dein Herz dem Knäblein hold. Schenk ihm dein Herz.
Ende von Die Könige.
O Jesu kleines Kind, doch ewig großer Held. Bei Hans Assmann von Abschatz. Read in German. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are on the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. O Jesu kleines Kind, doch ewig großer Held. O Jesu kleines Kind, doch ewig großer Held, ein Fürst in deinem Reich und Gast auf deiner Welt. Mensch, Bruder, Gott mein Freund, du Trost und Licht der Heiden, itzt kömmt der werte Tag, der dich zu uns gebracht. Der Christen frohe Schar begehet ihn mit Freuden und bringt mit Andacht zu die wundervolle Nacht. Man höret, wie dein Lob in allen Kirchen klingt, von dem ein Engel selbst den frommen Hirten singt. Jedwedes gläubigs Herz will seinen Eifer zeigen, wünscht, betet, lobt und dankt, so viel es immer kann. Wie sollt ich denn allein mit stummem Munde schweigen? Nimm gnädig auch von mir die Hand voll Weihrauch an. Wie billig fing ich dich, du süßes Wunderkind, durch dessen kräftig Wort der Weltkreis ward gegründet. Die Finsternis erleucht, der Himmel ausgebreitet, das Wasser abgeteilt, die Sternen angebrennt, die Erde mir zum Schloss und Garten zubereitet, mit Tieren jeder Art besetzt ihr Element. Du bauest nicht vor dich, wie groß die Welt mag sein, so wäre sie dir doch zur Wohnung allzu klein. Viel höher steigen noch die Werke deiner Liebe. Du schaffest, dass sie sollen der Erde Meister sein. Den Mann vom Erdenkloß, das Weib von seiner Riebe, du prägest in den Ton dein edles Bildnis ein. Ach, leider, dieser Ton nimmt fremde Zeichen an. Der Schlangenlist verführt das Weib und sie den Mann, der rein geschaffene Mensch wird zum befleckten Sünder. Durch einen Apfelbiss verleut er Gottes Reich. Der bösen Eltern Schuld erbt auf die bösen Kinder, und gleiche Missetat macht ihre Strafe gleich. O süßes Wunderkind, wie kräftig liebest du, du schleusest dennoch nicht dein Vaterherze zu. Was kein gefallener Geist in Ewigkeit kann hoffen, ist uns durch dich erlangt, ein ausgesöhnter Gott. Der Himmel steht uns durch deine Wohltat offen, der Segen vor den Fluch, das Leben vor den Tod. Du, deinem Vater gleich an Alter und Gewalt, verleugnest uns zu gut die göttliche Gestalt und lässt dich Pflegesohn des armen Josephs nennen. Du großes Fürstenkind wirst an die Brust gelegt, der Mutter, welche dich vor Vater muss erkennen und dich als reine Magd auf keuchen Armen trägt. Der König aller Welt gibt einem Bettler nach, die finstere Stallung ist sein königlich Gemach. Die Krippe fasset den, der alle Welt erfüllet, der, dem der Himmel ist sein täglich Ehrenkleid, wird dürstig und entblößt in Windeln eingehüllet, lebt reich von allem Gut in höchster Dürftigkeit. Der des Gesetzes Joch von unseren Schultern tut, vergeußt denselben nach sein königliches Blut, nimmt die beschwerte Last auf seinen edlen Rücken, die unsere Zärtlichkeit nicht länger tragen kann. Vor dem sich Könige von fremden Landen bücken, den nimmt ein fremdes Land vor armen Fremdling an. Der manchen Fürstthron in Asch und Staub verkehrt, flieht bei der finstern Nacht vor seiner Feinde Schwert, will einsam und verjagt in zarter Jugend reisen, erduldet ungescheut des Fliehens Ungemach, damit er uns den Weg zum Himmel möchte weisen, und wir durch Not und Tod mit Freuden folgen nach. O süßes Wunderkind, wie kräftig liebest du! Du schleust den Feinden nicht dein liebreich Herze zu, du willst sie ewig auch an deiner Seite wissen. Gibst ihnen, was du selbst begibst, die Himmelsruh, versüßest ihren Tod durch Tod und Blutvergießen. O süßes Wunderkind, wie kräftig liebest du! Hier steht die Feder an, der Sinnen Kraft verschwindt, vor solcher Liebe Kraft mein Herze wird entzündt, von Flammen heißer Brunst. Ich küsse deine Wiegen und lade dich zu mir in tiefster Demut ein. Ach, möchte dieser Schatz in meinen Armen liegen, wie würd ich so entzückt und voller Freuden sein. O Jesu, Gottes Sohn und reines Jungfernkind, das sich zugute mir in unser Armut sinnt. Was soll und kann ich dir für deine Liebe schenken? Nichts anderes als mich selbst, gewaschen durch dein Blut. Gib, dass ich möge stets an solche Liebe denken, durch Wirkung dieser Flammen entgehender Höllenglut. Gib, dass ich dermal einst, o Jesu Gottes Sohn, an dieser Krippenstadt verehre deinen Thron, den Stern, der dich geweißt, zu deinen Füßen schaue. Dich, Gast der Welt, begrüß in deinem Eigentum und ewig einverleibt der schönen Himmelsaue, mit Engeln ohne Zahl besinge deinen Ruhm. End of O Jesu kleines Kind, doch ewig großer Held, bei Hans Assmann von Abschatz.
Knecht Ruprecht by Theodore Storm, read in German. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Knecht Ruprecht. Ruprecht. Habt guten Abend, alt und jung, bin allen wohl bekannt genug. Von draus vom Walde komm ich her. Ich muss euch sagen, es weihnachtet sehr. Überall auf den Tannenspitzen sah ich goldene Lichtlein sitzen. Und droben aus dem Himmelstor sah mit großen Augen das Christkind hervor. Und wie ich so strolch durch den finstern Tann, da rief's mich mit heller Stimme an. Knecht Ruprecht, rief es, alte Gesell, hebe die Beine und spute dich schnell. Die Kerzen fangen zu brennen an, das Himmelstor ist aufgetan. Alt und jung sollen nun von der Jagd des Lebens einmal ruhen. Und morgen flieg ich hinab zur Erden, denn es soll wieder Weihnachten werden. Ich sprach, o liebe Herr Christ, meine Reise fast zu Ende ist. Ich soll nur noch in diesen Stadt, wo's eitel gute Kinder hat. Hast denn das Säcklein auch bei dir? Ich sprach, das Säcklein, das ist hier, denn Äpfel, Nuss und Mandelkern essen fromme Kinder gern. Hast denn die Rute auch bei dir? Ich sprach, die Rute, die ist hier, doch für die Kinder nur die Schlechten, die trifft sie auf den Teil, den Rechten. Christkindlein sprach, so ist es recht, so geh mit Gott, mein treuer Knecht. Von draus vom Walde komm ich her, ich muß euch sagen, es weihnachtet sehr. Nun sprecht, wie ich's hier innen find, sind's gute Kind, sind's böse Kind. Vater, die Kinder sind wohl alle gut, haben nur mitunter was trotzigen Mut. Ruprecht, ei, für trotzigen Kindermut ist meine lange Rute gut. Heißt es bei euch denn nicht mitunter, nieder dem Kopf und die Hosen runter? Vater, wie einer sündigt, so wird er gestraft. Die Kinder sind schon alle brav. Ruprecht, stecken Sie die Nas auch tüchtig ins Buch? Lesen und schreiben und rechnen genug? Vater, Sie lernen mit Ihrer kleinen Kraft. Wir hoffen zu Gott, dass es endlich schafft. Ruprecht, beten Sie denn nach altem Brauch im Bett Ihr Abendsprüchlein auch? Vater, neulich hört ich im Kämmerlein eine kleine Stimme sprechen allein, und als ich an die Tür getreten, für alle Liebe hört ich sie beten. Ruprecht, so nehmet denn Christkindleins Gruß, Kuchen und Äpfel, Äpfel und Nuss. Probiert einmal von seinen Gaben, morgen sollt ihr was Besseres haben. Dann kommt mit seinem Kerzenschein Christkindlein selber zu euch herein. Heut hält es noch am Himmel wacht. Nun schlafet sanft, habt gute Nacht. End of Knecht Ruprecht by Theodore Storm, read by B.G. Oxford, December 2008.
Weihnachten by Joseph von Eichendorff, read in German. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Weihnachten von Josef von Eichendorff. Markt und Straßen stehen verlassen. Still erleuchtet jedes Haus. Sinnend geh ich durch die Gassen. Alles sieht so festlich aus. An den Fenstern haben Frauen buntes Spielzeug fromm geschmückt. 1000 Kindlein stehen und schauen, sind so wunderstill beglückt. Und ich wandre aus den Mauern bis hinaus ins freie Feld. Heeres Glänzen, heilges Schauern, wie so weit und still die Welt. Sterne hoch die Kreise schlingen. Aus des Schnees Einsamkeit steigt's wie wunderbares Singen. O, du gneidenreiche Zeit. End of Weihnachten by Josef von Eichendorff. Read by Ernst Pattynama.
Weihnachtsabend by Theodor Storm. Read in German. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Weihnachtsabend. Die fremde Stadt durchschritt ich sorgenvoll, der Kinder denkend, die ich ließ zu Haus. Weihnachten war's, durch alle Gassen scholl der Kinderjubel und des Markts Gebraus. Und wie der Menschenstrom mich fortgespült, drang mir ein heiser Stimmlein in das Ohr. Kauft, lieber Herr! Ein magres Händchen hielt, feilbietend, mir ein ärmlich Spielzeug vor. Ich schrak empor, und beim Laternenschein sah ich ein bleiches Kinderangesicht. Wes Alters und Geschlechts es mochte sein, erkannt ich im Vorübertreiben nicht. Nur von dem Treppenstein, darauf es saß, noch immer hört ich, mühsam wie es schien, kauft, lieber Herr, den Ruf ohn Unterlass, doch hat wohl keiner ihm Gehör verliehn. Und ich? War's Ungeschick? War es die Scham, am Weg zu handeln mit dem Bettelkind? Ehe meine Hand zu meiner Börse kam, verscholl das Stimmlein hinter mir im Wind. Doch als ich endlich war mit mir allein, erfaßte mich die Angst im Herzen so, als säß mein eigen Kind auf jenem Stein und schrie nach Brot, indessen ich entfloh. End of Weihnachtsabend by Theodor Storm. Read by Hokuspokus.
Soneto de Natal by Machado de Assis. Read in Portuguese. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Homem era aquela noite amiga, noite cristã, berço do Nazareno. Ao relembrar os dias de pequeno, e a viva dança e a lépida cantiga, quis transportar ao verso doce e ameno as sensações da sua idade antiga, naquela mesma velha noite amiga, noite cristã, berço do Nazareno. Escolheu o soneto. A folha branca pede-lhe a inspiração, mas frouxa e manca, a pena não acode ao gesto seu. E em vão lutando contra o metro adverso, só lhe saiu este pequeno verso: mudaria o Natal ou mudei eu? End of Soneto de Natal by Machado de Assis.